Welcome to the Traffic and Safety Commission. We're short a commissioner, but hopefully he'll show up in a bit. I'd like to bring this Traffic and Safety Commission to order, and staff, would you take roll?
Commissioner Chomsky.
Present.
Chair McCroskey.
Present.
Commissioner Reeves.
Present.
Commissioner Del Rosario.
Present.
And Commissioner Chavandel is not present.
Great. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody who's here tonight. We have quite an extensive agenda this evening, so we'll look forward to keeping things moving. Some things are new on the agenda, some are just for us to look at, some are for us to make recommendations to the City Council. In general, the meeting goes like this. We start out with some sort of administrative stuff and some approval of minutes from before. And then we'll have a public comment period. This is when you get a chance to say something about things that are not otherwise on the agenda. We'll have a couple of presentations on police data and a shared mobility program, and then we'll get into item number 5, which has sort of the meat of the evening, our major discussion and action items. And for each one of those items, what we'll do is we'll have usually a presentation from staff. We'll have questions from the commission, and then we'll have a public comment period specifically for that item on the agenda. We do ask that if you're planning to make a public comment, that you find one of the public comment sheets in the back and fill it out. We'd like to get your name right on the minutes. We generally give you about 3 minutes to speak. We request that if you are agreeing with something somebody has said before you, that you name them instead of repeating what they've said and keep things moving. We do appreciate it. We do listen to everyone, I promise. So with that said, let's move to the approval of the minutes from previous meetings. And I think our first one is from July, the 26th of July draft minutes. Are there any comments or corrections from the commission?
Nope.
Okay. Can I get a let's just also encompass the September minutes. Are there any comments?
So I wasn't present for September, so I don't know.
So we need to
what
do these
impact that
separately
is.
then?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I get a resolution on approving the July minutes?
I'll move to approve the July minutes.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. And then on the September minutes, are there any comments, or can I get
I do have some comments on the September minutes. So I have 3 small things. One is in section 4-2, there's a reference to a discussion about the locations of the 4 intersections, where the 4 unsignalized intersections are. I think that actually belongs with 4-1. I looked at the video and it was confusing because all the comments for 4-1 and 4-2 were interspersed. But my understanding is 4-1 was about unsignalized intersections and 4-2 was about traffic signals. So I think that the comment by Julie Winkelstein and its answer should be moved to 4-1. Then, only one other thing. In 6-2, in the discussion of back-in angled parking, there's a reference to the safety issues that it raises. And it says, let me see if I can find what it says now. Sorry.
Can you give us a page number?
Yes, on page 8. It's a long section for that number. Back-in angled parking avoids the risk of vehicles backing into pedestrian crossings, and that's true, but we also commented that it avoids the risk of backing into moving vehicles, moving cars, and moving bicycles that are on the street. And I was hoping we could add that observation to the minutes as well.
Great. Any other comments or corrections? Can I get a resolution?
I'll move to approve the minutes with the updates from Commissioner Chomsky.
And a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 And a recusal or a abstain?
Abstain.
All right, great. So that moves us on to the public comment period. And once again, this is for comments not on agenda items otherwise on our agenda this evening.
Hi, I'm Amy Smollins with Albany Strollers and Rollers. We're a volunteer nonprofit organization focused on service and advocacy for active transportation. That includes travel by bike, foot, scooter, wheelchair, skates, skateboards, and something else I may have forgotten. We comprise about 700 member households on our announcement list and about 300 on our discussion list. After consultation with our discussion list, we've decided to endorse Measure FF and oppose Proposition 6 as an organization, both of which are on the November 6th ballot. Measure FF is an extension of Measure CC, which was passed by voters in Alameda and Contra Costa counties in 2004. It calls for a continuation of a monthly $1 parcel tax, 69 cents for multifamily units, to benefit East Bay Regional Parks. It'll continue existing voter-funded, approved funding for regional parks in western Alameda and Contra Costa counties without increased taxes. It will also provide regional trail connectivity for commuters and safe routes to school, including along the Bay Trail. So yes, that Bay Trail gap behind Golden Gate Fields that's been bugging us for decades will finally be closed thanks to CC and future improvements thanks to FF. So therefore, it's appropriate and logical that ASNR supports Measure FF. We're opposing Proposition 6. That would repeal a 2017 law known as S1B to fund transportation and transit through fuel and vehicle registration fees. In March 2018, the U.S. News & World Report rated California number 49 in road quality, 11th in bridge quality, 46th worst in commute times among the 50 states. S1B funds are being used statewide to support road repairs, bridge repairs, and transit updates. And here in Albany, S1B revenues have helped street fund repair, including the planned repaving of Washington Avenue between San Pablo and Spokane Avenues. And S1B revenues will contribute over $13 million to projects over the next 5 years here in Albany and $200 million in the Bay Area. So all road and transit users need the revenue from S1B, so ASNR is opposing Proposition 6. So if you use transport in any manner, and if you enjoy our parks and our beautiful Bay Trail, please vote yes on FF, no on 6. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm going to make a lot of enemies in the next 3 minutes, so I'm just going to jump right in. I think that I would like to see in Albany an effort to enforce the law, which is that you have to stop, if you're a bicyclist or a car, you have to stop at a red light and you have to stop at a stop sign. And I bring this up more, I've brought it up before, I can't remember if I mentioned the bicyclists, but I don't know what can be done, but I would like to see some sort of effort on the part of the commission to address this, because it concerns me. It's getting more and more dangerous to be a pedestrian in Albany. I almost got hit the other day trying to cross Solano because I was halfway across and a car just went ahead and went, even though I was already in the crosswalk. If I hadn't been watching, I would have been killed or hit anyway. But I also think that bicyclists should be obeying the same laws, or the laws should be changed. But I think that we should be setting a good example to our children and also making a safer place. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment on items not otherwise on the agenda?
I'll just note there was one letter that was submitted in writing that was included. That
we've received on our desk here? Right. But that is on...
one item that was in the agenda packet that was for an item not on the agenda regarding safety concerns at the Masonic and Greenway crossing of Brighton.
Right. Now I'm recalling reading it. So that's in our record, and we've all had a chance to read it. Great. So with that, I think we'll move on to our presentations and start with the monthly police data on collisions and citations.
Thank you. In the month of September, there were a total of 2 pedestrian collisions, 0 bicycle collisions. Total vehicle collisions were 16 with 5 injury collisions. And citations issued by the police department in the month of September totaled 51, and there were 5 DUI arrests. That concludes the police safety presentation.
Any questions from the commission? Any comments from the public? Responses or comments from the commission?
Keep it up. It's helpful. Thank you.
I agree it is helpful. And with the exception of citations, I think we're seeing a slight uptick in the trend lines for perhaps more accidents and DUIs. I'm sorry,
Collisions.
crashes and DUIs. It's hard to change a lifetime of saying one thing to another, but I'm working on it. Thank you very much for the data, and let's keep going. Item number 4.2, Shared Mobility Programs Update.
So there are currently two companies operating in the city of Albany. Gig Car Share, a shared car program, has reported their monthly data. They've seen strong growth over the last few months since the slight drop that we reported in June. Trips reported are those that are starting or ending in Albany. That was a question earlier. Any start or end in Albany counts as a trip for this accounting. Staff did respond to one complaint regarding concentration of vehicles on the 800 block of Polk. Limebike operates a shared dockless bike program. The bicycles trips seen in Albany peaked in May at 1,200 and have been declining since then. We've seen between 20 and 30 vehicles within the city of Albany over that time frame. Unique riders has also been declining since June. 50 scooter trips were shown in August, 90 in September. They don't place them in the city of Albany, but looking at the data they report, 0 to 3 have, day by day venture in, venture out into the city. Beyond the currently operating programs, their staff has received one inquiry regarding electric scooters from another company. Skip Scooters, in addition to Lime, stated interest in operating e-bikes and e-scooters. Both of those are, I think, relatively dependent on having neighboring jurisdictions also have. So Berkeley is working on a permitting program that probably, for electric scooters, that probably won't kick in till second quarter of next year by the time they develop their guidelines and issue their requests for permits applications. El Cerrito did a pilot for Lime for the bikes and are expanding that to electric bicycles, not scooters. So we may also start seeing electric bikes once El Cerrito allows it in the neighboring jurisdiction. There's also some change in the industry overall that's affecting all of this, as these various providers are starting to want to provide various options within their service. So there's been a lot of mergers. Lyft bought Motivate, which operates the regional bike share program. Uber bought Jump Bikes and has invested in Lime and owns a car share service. So all these things are starting to get some integration as these providers shift to trying to provide mobility as a service across all modes. That's my report.
Great. Questions from the commission?
So the scooters are coming from Richmond, Oakland. People are taking 7-mile scooter trips.
I don't know the origins of them. Anecdotally, I've seen them mainly on the Greenway, so people doing a longer trip from Oakland. There have been some venturing into Berkeley, but they're not permitted, and if someone drops them off there and before they move them out, someone else may take them further north. So I don't know a clear answer to that, where they're coming from.
And my second question is, if the scooters do end up eventually in Albany, do we have a vehicle code or city code that the scooters would need to abide by? Have we thought that through? Is it going to be the same as cyclists? What about kids who are under, what about kids who are under 12? I think we have different rules for. So how would that all work out?
It would fall under our existing rules. I can bring a more in-depth report back to you on how that would work. Our allowance for bicycles on the sidewalk is for kids under a certain age and excludes, I believe, the commercial districts. The scooters are treated as vehicles, I believe, but I'll double check on that.
I didn't quite follow in the Lime presentation. Is all of this data for the East Bay combined, or is some of it Albany specific? Or
This is Albany specific.
this is all Albany specific? Okay. And do we know if the decrease by 50% between June and September is typical for bike sharing in general, or has something, like, can we identify whether that's something that's happened with Lime in Albany in particular, or if that's
I can ask
a trend?
El Cerrito for their information to see if they've seen similar trend.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Any other questions? Is there anybody who might wish to make public comment? Come on up. Amy, why don't you let Julie go first this time? Go ahead, Julie.
I just had a question, actually. Electric bike, can you just explain that? And then, as an extension of that, I'm assuming it's a bike with a motor on it. Maybe you start pedaling and it triggers it, and it's a generator. It has a generator that is perpetuated by the. So does that mean that bike has to be on the street? It's like a vehicle. So, is the way that Albany treats bicyclists riding through lights and stop signs going to be the same way we treat electric bikes? That's really my question. Thank you.
Go ahead, Amy. We'll answer after everybody's done.
So Amy Smollins again. Part of the reason the Lime bike trips have declined, Justin, is that periodically they literally disappear. I live on Canes, a half a block off Solano, and often they were all kind of clumped in obvious places on bulb outs. And then a couple weeks ago, for example, I went to take Bart to go to work, but I was going to have to take the bus home, so I decided, okay, I'll take Lime Bike, and my app showed nothing. They were all gone. And I walked up Solano, and they were all gone. They had just, like, they'd been taken somewhere. I don't know if they took them to El Cerrito or to a new place where they were starting them, and I called my boyfriend and said, quick, you take me to BART because I'm going to be late for work, and da-da-da-da. And I called them and spoke to someone who didn't know anything and then really didn't get a real response as to what happened. So if you can find out what happens, because they have periodically all of a sudden just disappeared. Like it happened months ago, and then it was like 2 Saturdays ago, I think it was. And, we can't count on using them if we can't count on them being there. So it'd be really good if it were reliable, but now I'm sort of thinking, how can I think that it's going to be there when I wake up if I don't know if they decided to take them to San Leandro or something because they're starting a program. So maybe that's part of the reason why the usage declined, because we couldn't find them. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? So let's bring it back. We had a question about e-bikes and the difference in regulations and how that might work?
I believe they're treated identically with bikes, with the one exception. I think there's some discretion for local jurisdictions when you're talking about trails and whether they're permitted on like trail kind of facilities that bikes are generally allowed on. I think some jurisdictions have restricted electric bikes on those.
But Albany in particular hasn't. Do you know?
I believe not.
Albany has not in particular. I believe there are also some restrictions on the speeds that electric bikes are allowed to achieve, and that changes where they can go on trails or on the street. But I don't remember the specifics.
There are speed restrictions, I think, state regulation for scooters as well.
Ah, okay.
Would this be something that we need to update in our section of the code?
We
Be to update the technology?
have a lot of things we need to update
I
in
know,
our
I know.
code. So yes, I think this would be something that as the industry settles down perhaps a little bit, and we get lessons learned from both here in Albany and other communities, we should probably adopt some regulations that are unique to those.
I think I can say something about the intention of electric bikes, which is that they're not meant to be like Vespa scooters. They're not meant to go 20, 25 miles an hour. They're meant to behave essentially like pedal-powered bicycles, and they do have pedals. And the intention is not that they should go faster, but that they should be easier to use, and they should enable more people to use them who otherwise would not be able to ride, either because they don't have the physical strength, or because they're wearing dress clothes and can't get sweaty, or because they're going up a hill or something like that. So it's
We're going
intended,
further.
or going further. It's intended to extend the range of what you can do on a bicycle without changing the character. And if we find that electric bicycles are behaving in a way that is buzzing people and scaring people, then I think the bicycles themselves should be modified to try to prevent that, because that's not, at least that's not the stated intention of what an electric bicycle is supposed to be.
I would add, though, that the way that the scooters are being used is different from what the intention would be for e-bikes. And a lot of cities are really struggling with this to just keep up with the technology that's coming onto their streets, and whether to allow them, not allow them, where they can park them, what neighborhoods the scooters should be in, the safety issues. So I would ask that, I'm a bit under the impression that Lime can start the scooter program in Albany without much input from the city, is my understanding. But I think we should treat the scooters similar to how we treated the bike program, and have that be as a pilot, with some input from this commission and from council. I just think there's a lot more to consider with scooters than there is with traditional bike share, and just seeing how they're used. And I work in downtown Oakland, and they're all over, literally all over the city streets, whether they're parked or people are riding them on city streets. So there's not a whole lot, at least in Oakland, I see, of a regulation of them, or some care into how they're being used, if they're being safe. I think there's just more of a recreational aspect to the scooter than traditional bike share. And so I think, and they're a lot faster, right? They're 15 miles per hour consistently, right? You just have to throttle and that's it. You're going 15 miles per hour pretty quickly. So given all these things, I think we have to take a pretty close look at scooters, or at least we go through a pilot process and we can evaluate.
And I also wanted to speak to Amy's comment about availability, and that I think it's just a cautionary tale about what happens when we, as a city, rely on outside private companies to come in and provide for our transportation needs. We don't really have any control over what a big company decides to do. They can come anytime, they can leave anytime, they can keep more or fewer bikes in the places where we think they belong. It's really up to them and their beliefs about what's going to make their company the most profit in the long run, or in the short run, or whatever their their corporate goals are don't necessarily align with our mobility goals. And it's great that we have all these new services, but we do need to keep our eyes open to the fact that as we become dependent, partially dependent on services that are provided without democratic governance, we are kind of at their mercy. So.
All right. In the interest of moving along, I think I'm going to move on to the next item. Thank you all for your comments. And we'll move on to item number 5.1 for discussion. The I-80 Central Avenue interchange improvements in El Cerrito and Richmond, specifically the Phase 2 Local Roads Realignment Project. Welcome.
Yes, we have representative consultants for the project going to give a presentation.
Thank you. Justin, you may know this better. Where
Yeah, you can load it there.
plugs in here.
Can we share one?
But can you control it? Okay, great. It should be on the. Can you access the USB drives in there?
Jeep. If he wants me to control it.
Not seeing it here. It's plugged in.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's plugged in right there. Okay. All right. Thank you. No, sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, it hides.
Yeah. So, here's your thumb drive. Great. Thank you.
Doesn't like
Should be.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I can go to the manual here.
We always have a backup.
We have a projector.
Yeah.
Just bring it over here. I'll read it.
All right, can we try it on?
Sure.
Sure. For some reason, it's not pulling up. Thanks. If not, I've got hard copies, guys. Always come prepared for failure. Technology. Got handouts for
Well, while they're getting ready, I'll just introduce myself. So I'm Jacqueline Majors. I am the community outreach person working on the project on behalf of the city of Richmond, along with NCE. And then I'll let Ryan introduce himself.
Great. This pulls up here.
I'll control it from here if you just
Thank you.
want to tell me.
Yeah, Ryan Schaefer with NCE. Just wanted to give everyone an update in a neighboring community in Richmond. This is a congestion management project that'll improve traffic along Central. If anyone going out particularly on the weekends out to Costco, this is it can be a big deal. And I know some of this translates into traffic over on Buchanan. So this is a project that's funded by CCTA. I think will be a big improvement to the community. And so we're at a concept design phase and just wanted to share with you our latest update and what our current plans are in case the community's interested in this and the commission here as well. So I'm Ryan Schaefer. Jacqueline's here with her. She's handling all of our public outreach along the way. Go to the first slide. I'll kind of provide an overview. So you're just familiar with Central here. This is where the backup is occurring. You currently have a lot of traffic that occurs at Pierce because you have two basically signalized intersections that occur very closely spaced to the freeway. So this creates some basically inefficient driving patterns, people trying to make left turns, queuing up behind left turns. And so the idea is to push the signalized intersection further back towards San Mateo, which is currently a dead-end street. There's no through street there. So we're going to take out the intersection, and if we go to the next slide, I'll kind of describe it in greater detail. So we're going to take out all the left turn movements onto Pierce. You're going to have right in and right out, also from San Luis as well. So the idea is to get rid of these traffic queues that are backing up at this signal and push it further back towards Pierce. And we've done models, we've done traffic models on this, and we've improved the level of surface substantially. This is something that was proposed as part of a feasibility study back in 2009 with CCTA. So this is just the implementation of the local streets and roads improvements that we're, as the consultant, that we're tasked to do. So that's this intersection. We'll go to the next area here. So this is the new signalized intersection at Central. So you get new left turn movements here off of Central. People can come down San Mateo and connect into Pierce Street. You also get designated right-hand turns onto Central from San Mateo Street, and there's new bus stop locations. And actually, an improvement is we get a designated bus stop location on Central Avenue, so the traffic isn't backing up behind that. So new signalized intersection. Again, we're just moving traffic further back from the freeway and removing these inefficient traffic cues with these left turn movements. Next slide. So this is just the connection to Pierce Street from San Mateo. So there's a new leg that comes in that's brand new with this, the stop intersection is what we've placed at this intersection. So this just shows the improvements on Pierce Street. Go to the next slide. And this is just a zoom in of the new leg of San Mateo Street. So further up is Central, Pierce is over here. And this is the new elbow and new connection point that comes through private property. So there'll be some private property acquisition as part of this project, which ties into a little bit of the timeline. Usually these types of projects can take anywhere from 1 to 2 years, but this is going to probably take projected about 2 to 3 years because of the private property acquisition. Jacqueline and I have reached out to the private property owners and spoken with each one of them on this project. So far, fairly receptive to the project and understanding, and they actually were made aware of this back in 2009. So overall, a new connection for San Mateo Street, improved traffic, level of service for Central. I think it'll help out with your traffic on Buchanan because I know probably people are coming over and using Buchanan as a cut through in Albany. So just a quick update. We're at concept design. We're still doing public outreach and speaking to various stakeholders. This will kind of continue to go through design, CEQA, and then be constructed hopefully in 2 to 3 years is what our timeline currently is. So I'll open it up to any questions you might have that I can answer.
From the commission?
Can you talk a little bit more about the traffic model and how diverting the traffic, majority of the traffic to San Mateo would decrease the LOS at the various legs of the intersection?
Yeah, let's go back.
Could I ask you to speak more into the microphone?
Oh, absolutely.
Some
Sorry.
people are watching from home, and we do record the meetings.
Yeah, no problems.
Thank you.
So the level of service, we have a traffic model that we've done. We did a traffic impact assessment report. I can share those results with the commission in terms of the specifics, but we've modeled every one of the nodes in that area, and particularly the nodes at Pierce and also San Mateo. The level of service goes from D, or actually E and F, which are nearing failed conditions, to they improve to levels D and C. How the specifics of that are modeled, I can certainly share our model or be very transparent about the results of that model.
I guess my question is intuitively, if you have the same number of vehicles and you're moving the intersection a block away, it seems like you're shifting part of the problem, I guess, to a block away, which maybe helps for I-80 itself because your queues aren't so close to the signals at I-80, but it's still the same number of vehicles and just going a different path.
Yeah, so the inefficiencies that we have modeled really come to the left-hand turn movement. So there's not enough space for those people to queue adequately to make a left-hand turn onto Pierce. And so they're backing in through traffic. And so we're making space by dedicating a turn pocket further up where we have space and real estate to allow those turn movements. So by having a dedicated turn pocket, you're relieving that traffic queue that's inefficiently queuing behind and backing up behind that left-hand turn, both on Pierce and on Central. And again, we'd be happy to share the models. Fair and Piers has been doing all that work for us.
Okay. If I can continue with another question, I thought I saw an earlier version that had San Mateo as like a bus bypass only. Was that something that you guys ever considered, or am I mistaken on that?
That might have been an earlier consideration as part of the feasibility, but bus traffic, and that's actually why you see that enlarged elbow area. We've actually accommodated all the turn movements, but we have the buses routed through San Mateo.
Yeah, okay. For full disclosure, I am in the planning department at AC Transit, but.
Great. And we've coordinated with AC Transit as well on all their.
I think it is.
Yep. All their bus types and movements and.
And did that turning radius from San Mateo to Central, was that fine for transit?
Yeah, we've done all the turn radius movements, templates, shared it with AC Transit, and also actually gotten their feedback on all the bus stop locations.
Thanks.
Which is where you see the bus locations, those were moved accordingly to AC Transit when we had our meeting with them.
Okay.
So when they attended the meeting, you're right. When we had our meeting with AC Transit, some of the bus stops actually were moved to accommodate what their accommodations were. So these are definitely according to their stipulations.
Great, thank you.
I have. So the left-hand turn from onto Central, westbound, is it a left turn signal? Is there an arrow for the left turn?
For Central going westbound,
west.
Central, left on San Mateo?
Yes.
Yes, that'll be signalized.
Okay.
With a left turn signal.
And in your model, did the load on Pierce Street change in any significant way? Or would your model have shown anything like that?
So Pierce Street, this section of Pierce is going to, obviously there's going to be less man on that section, but in terms of the traffic, it's going to be more efficiently processed because, again, it's going to be right turn out.
Okay.
And again, the reason Pierce backs up and the Saigon Seafood complains about it a lot is that you have a left-hand turn queue.
Right.
And there's no dedicated lane. So it's going to improve traffic on Pierce as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is really part of, you probably have seen, I don't know if everyone's driven, there's some behavioral changes that they're trying to address with the first phase, which is they have some signage that directs you to certain on and off ramps.
On the weekends.
So that's really on the weekends. That's phase one. And that was actually at the interchange as part of Caltrans, and this is phase two. So this is local streets and roads, and this is being funded through CTTA, and then the City of Richmond has hired us as the consultant. So this is, after this phase is complete, this really completes the interchange improvements and the improvements to congestion at that area.
Was there a version of this that we saw that had some sort of improved sidewalk and maybe even cycle track along Central Avenue, or am I imagining things?
Not along Central. So currently we have let's go back, let's show the zoom in the second, let's go back one more. Yeah, there. So we do have a dedicated bike lane here at this intersection, but we've indicated sharrows at this point. Due to we have really heavily restricted area in terms of the impact to the private properties along San Mateo, so we had to use sharrows. So, but along Pierce, if Albany, El Cerrito, Richmond wanted to work on a class 4 cycle track, the way we have designed this is that it would accommodate a future cycle track if you remove parking.
For north-south movements?
Yes, just on Pierce. But on Central, we have never been tasked with accommodating bicycle movements. It's so congested and so restricted in real estate that we have never.
Okay, I must have misremembered that. So I wanted to ask about that short bike lane segment. Is that intended to support bicycles that are continuing north on San Mateo Street?
Correct. Right.
Rather than any bicycles that might be bold enough to want to turn left onto Central Avenue?
That would be a bold move. Eventually, the idea is to carry bike movements on Pierce because there's an ATP grant that's currently that Caltrans is looking at to get. There's a connection piece underneath the freeway that will include a dedicated bike and pedestrian facility.
That must be what I was remembering. So that would, then the bicycles would continue north on Pierce and turn left without crossing Central
Right,
and travel on a dedicated facility on the south side of Central.
right. And that would all
Okay,
be
that
within.
explains my
You're
misremembering.
correct. That was Caltrans study, and that's what they're working on now.
Okay, so all this stuff over San Mateo is serving a totally different purpose than that. It's,
Right.
the bike route is to continue north onto San Mateo. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's kind of the missing link, so to speak, because they, as part of phase one, you saw that they added some bike facilities going over to Costco, but there's still that missing link under the freeway, and that's what they hope to address with the ATP grant. Yeah.
Follow-up question, if I can. The parking on Pierce Street, I assume those are existing parking stalls, the on-street parking?
Yes, we're maintaining all of the existing on-street parking on Pierce. We do have some modification to some of the informal parking on San Mateo. But again, that's a dead-end street, and some of those spaces are really not formally dedicated.
And do you know the utilization of those parking spaces on Pierce if we ever considered a bike facility there that would have to have them removed?
Can't speak to the utilization. I know businesses like Metro Dog claim that they're in high use, but we have not done a study specifically on that. But that's certainly something that could be looked at down the road and could be a dedicated bike facility if that was acceptable to the community. Yeah.
One other question. So as someone is driving or bicycling north on Pierce from the Pacific East Mall, will there be signage at the intersection of San Mateo explaining that if you want to go anywhere other than east, you should turn right here? Like, we don't want people to continue north thinking that they're going to have access to
make a
north and westbound destinations from. So have you designed the signage?
There's obviously a learned behavior, but that's something we'll consider during the construction document phase. We're still in concept phase, but
Okay.
if that's something that is advocated for or thought to be necessary, obviously our traffic engineers will advise us on that. We're of course the civil engineers, but if that's something could be a practical solution. Some of it's behavioral, and it takes a while for people to learn that. But for people that are new to the area or not familiar with the area, that might be helpful. So I'll mention that to our traffic engineers.
And what is the nature of the barrier? If you were to continue north on Pierce and get to that right turn only spot and be tempted to try to sneak through and go left or straight anyway, what kind of barrier is preventing you from doing that?
So we're looking at two different things. One is either flexible lane delineators or probably like a flexible bollard that bends over when you hit it. So those are the two things that we're looking at. We're trying not to introduce something that's too hard.
But it'll be something that has a couple
sticks up.
feet of sticking up from the
That's
road.
where those black dots
Okay,
are going to be some sort of vertical delineator.
so you'll see that
Yeah,
blocking your path. Okay.
right.
So in Albany, we have a large number of residents along Pierce Street in the towers. And actually, they have a large number of bicycles. And we have an off-street path on Pierce that we hope to connect southward.
Yes.
But those same individuals might be interested in taking their bikes northward, perhaps trying to get to the BART station. It looks like so far in this plan, your project area doesn't really include a way to get through from Pierce Street over into the street network around Central. Is that correct?
So if you're going north, say for example, you're going north on Pierce and you want to eventually get over to Costco, for example, that's the ATP piece that's missing.
I understand. What if I want to go east?
If you want to go east, then you would go on to San Mateo, which would be Sharrows, and then you could continue further north. But we haven't looked at anything dedicated on Central itself. That's beyond the purvey of this project.
I wasn't asking that.
Yeah.
To me, Central is a very busy street. It's not terribly desirable. It
Right.
wouldn't attract a lot of cyclists.
Right.
And San Mateo has some elevation issues. So neither of those seem desirable. At this point, you can bicycle through the mall But that's private property.
Right.
You can't really rely on that. Okay.
It's definitely a weakness in that area and that link for bicycle connectivity. I wish we could offer up a better solution on this. There's currently no dedicated bike facilities. The fact that we're even placing sharrows will be an improvement over what's currently there. But it's a challenged area. We recognize that, and the purpose of this is really on the congestion management piece. But that could be something that is later considered as part of another project. But I agree. As a bicyclist, I would find that challenging to navigate.
So the recommendations for the use of sharrows have changed recently on a national level,
Yes.
and they're being only recommended for the most calm of streets. What's the expected general speed of traffic on these streets?
It'll be 25 or less.
So 30.
People speed 30.
If it'll be posted at 25, that means we expect speeds around 28, 29.
But it'll be no different than another residential street in terms of the speed limit. But in terms of traffic demand, you're absolutely right. It's going to be closer to like a collector, maybe a lighter arterial street. But
So I guess my question is, are sharrows still appropriate?
it's for us. The sharrows are the best we can do with the given real estate. So there was a lot of complicated analysis. We looked at about 4 different alternatives when we looked at this right-of-way take, and additional land and right-of-way take would have made the project cost prohibitive because it renders some of the adjacent properties less useful, particularly public storage. So those are some of the considerations where there was a substantial jump in the real estate and property acquisition costs. And so we had to kind of thread the eye of the needle, so to speak, in that area to make that work. And so that dog leg, that connector that's going through the public storage building is really the key piece that we had to play with. We probably could have played with more real estate on the existing San Mateo, but that was the difficult piece that we played with. So it's a game of trade-offs of, getting the congestion management project through and having the adequate funds. Yeah.
Okay, that's my questions. Any other questions from the dais? Any questions from the public?
Or comments?
Won't you please come up? So we do a little shuffle here. Thank you.
Sure. Happy to answer.
Can you go to the mic, sir? Thank you.
There's a walking path from Carlson Boulevard down to this area. Is that over here, or is that further down?
It's further down, right?
Folks been on that?
Do you mean the
Sorry,
path along Cerrito
Along
Creek?
the creek, I
That's
think?
further to the
Further
south.
Okay, so it's not in this map then?
No.
Okay. And then the 2 bus stops are the yellow areas, is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah, just something to let you know about. I was at the AC Transit Transbay Task Force meeting. I know you're doing 2 or 3 years ahead, but they're about to change the Transbay buses that comes through this area. So the bus now, the L, which would work fine with this, will be going straight onto Central to the Interstate 80. So that's not going to, what's going to be replacing it is a bus coming from Richmond on 80, coming off Central, going down here, pick up there, and then back here, and then down Pierce. Has to do with the number of passengers.
Okay.
However, going back, that bus would come back up Pierce and around and go back on Central and get back on 80. So they wouldn't be able to stop at that stop right there, assuming that this is true in 2 or 3 years. Just so you know.
Yeah, it's good to know. Thank you. We've coordinated, multiple times with AC Transit, and it's valuable during concept design to get AC Transit's feedback because they're very selective about their bus stop locations and safety and the rules. So that's why we engaged them early on. And these are the bus stops that they've approved. If that's something that changes during the course of the project, we'll have to deal with that with AC Transit. But this is what they've had blessed so far.
If I could just tell you, according to the
Sir, I'm sorry, we can't pick you up out there very well. And I'll let you speak one more time, and then, yeah.
just from what they said at the meeting, that this change was going to take place in December of this year, this rerouting. just so you know.
I'll make sure it's recorded on the mic. I will reach out specifically to AC Transit about that change and see if that's something that they want to give us some guidance on. Great. Thanks for that comment. Thanks for making me aware of that.
Any other audience members want to comment on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for our comments. Susan, you look ready to go.
Well, there are other buses than the L, right, that
Yeah, there's
come
a
down
local bus.
Pierce, and we'll use that, right? There's 80.
80.
Yeah, so more local bus will use it, so.
Yeah, and the big thing that we did here was we tried to give them a dedicated space, at least there, to,
Right.
again, to pull them out of Central and to prohibit, people from queuing behind a bus. So that's, again, that took some careful coordination with a private landowner and developer, trying to, there's, again, some careful negotiations. So we're trying to push as much as we can for multimodal and transportation, but again, there are some limitations with private properties. Yep.
I want to thank you for coming and sharing this with us. We were very curious. Personally, I'm a little disappointed, but I understand the goals of the project are still being met. And perhaps you and I can ride the Sharrows after it's in.
Sure, we'll do it. Okay, I'll do it.
All right.
All right, thanks for having us.
One thing I should just, if I can't comment,
Please,
sorry,
yes.
Chair, but we should probably look at the status of the ATP project with Caltrans and Richmond and El Cerrito, because I think that changes a lot of things of, you have a lot of real estate here, right? I mean, yes, you can't make a whole lot of different turning movements on bike at Pearson Central, but if you do have some sort of facility along Central, then that changes how we would want, I think, Pierce to be designed for cyclists, in my opinion.
So stay in touch with the ATP process.
When we hear about our grants applications, we'll check on theirs as well.
All right, fair enough.
Okay,
Thank you very much for coming today.
thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay. Moving right along, and I've got a future bike ride. So far, so good. So we're going to move on to item number 5.2. This is the Albany Middle School and San Gabriel Annex street parking and traffic circulation item. And we already got one piece of correspondence from an audience member, so we have had a chance to look at that.
Thank you. So this item is regarding the development of the Albany Middle School Annex, or the San Gabriel Annex. The city involvement in this project is with the public right-of-way. We have worked with the district on improvements to the San Gabriel-Brighton intersection for safe pedestrian crossings. We have asked the school district to come back to us today with a proposal for curb management plans for the frontage along the middle school and the annex site. Red zones restrict parking at all times and are used for improving visibility for pedestrians approaching crosswalks and maintaining critical access for emergency personnel, fire hydrants. Designated curb space for loading zones is a balance between providing sufficient space for safe pickup and drop-off behavior and vehicle circulation during the peak times on the one hand, and demand for parking on the other. Loading zones at the school restrict parking between 7 and 9 a.m. and 2 to 3 p.m. These spaces are available for overnight parking for residents that depart before the 7 a.m. the next morning. At this point, I'll hand over the next part to the district to present their proposal, and then I can provide a brief discussion on the broader traffic circulation.
Thank you. Good evening, Commission. My name is Val Williams. I'm the superintendent for the Albany Unified School District. But I think you guys knew that. Is there a way to get the picture up on the screen?
I think he's working on it.
Thank you.
There we go.
So currently, the plan that we have is to have the parent and drop-off in 2 areas, and I came prepared and brought my handy-dandy. Hopefully this will work. It does work. This is great. So having the parent drop-off place here. Currently, there are 8 spaces, and so we would have 5 spaces here. This is the annex, and there'll be 5 parent drop-off spaces here. And then these are the areas where there is no parking, and then having, of course, wider crosswalk here, wider crosswalk here, wider here. One of the considerations that we were asked to consider was to add an additional parent drop-off space right here. And I do not think this is a good idea. Parents will drive up here, doors will open, and kids will more than likely exit on either side of, both sides where the car door opens. So my concern, I'm sorry.
With my vision, I'm not able to see what you're pointing at. Can you give a verbal description?
Okay, I'm going to try and do the north-south thing. I beg your indulgence. I grew up in Hawaii. We don't have north, south, east, and west, so I'm going to try this
But at
really
least
hard.
it's oriented the right
Okay,
way. It's
yes.
not one of those weird.
So north so south on Brighton here, if students open the car door on the north side, they're going to cross the street here. They're not going to come around the car and go up to the crosswalk. So for me, this is a safety issue if you have a parent drop-off there.
Okay, I understand. Thank
you. The other suggestion was to add a parent drop-off here. And I have concerns here because there is going to be a driveway here, and this really is only 2 or 3 spaces, and now you're actually in where there are homes. And so I have concern about that. In addition, adding another parent drop-off area eliminates or reduces the amount of parking spaces for the residents as well as for staff. And Albany Middle School currently has about 90 staff. We are with about between 880 and 900 students. With the temporary housing plan, we are going to need to, and I'm going to say this with a caveat, whatever the final decision is going to be on the temporary housing plan, that the plan is to put 1st through 3rd graders in the middle school annex, which is here, okay? That is going to be an addition of about 20 staff, about 12 teachers, administration, and then there's support staff that will come and go throughout the day, and they're going to need to find parking. Another consideration I think we were asked to consider is on Masonic here, where currently there is a, currently there.
Just hold your applause. We'll take your comments.
Currently there's a sign there, I think it says from noon until 6 for city vehicles during the school day. I do know that there are parents who do drop off their children there. I don't think it is as heavily used as maybe the community would want. So this area here, my concern is if you increase the number of, if you make that a parent drop-off point, you increase the number of spaces, that again is going to decrease the number of parking spaces that are available. I want to make sure I gave you all my, I think that is everything that's in the plan. I do have here tonight, just to help me with some information if need be, if the commission has questions, Deborah Brill is our principal of Albany Middle School, Terry Georgeson is our principal of Ocean View Elementary School, and Juan and Alice are here from DCA. I'm open to questions.
Questions from the commission?
If I may, the drop-off on San Gabriel, is that a white zone? Right there, right over the letters of San Gabriel? I'm sorry, going to the bottom of the page. Yeah, right there. So that's a passenger drop-off for the Annex school?
Yes, that is the plan.
And is that a temporary condition for the elementary school, or is that a permanent condition for both elementary?
That would be a permanent condition, so there'll be 5 spaces. So existing right now are 8 spaces. With the addition of this and then having this here, we actually end up with 10 spaces.
Okay.
Anything else, Robert?
Can you explain the Masonic Avenue thing again? So there's some spaces there that are already marked as what?
So this space here actually has there's a sign that says from noon until 6, city vehicles, school days only. I think I just saw it. Someone just showed it to me.
Okay.
Ah, there we go.
So it's not available for general public parking or
So
drop-off?
it's a green, it's a green sign that says reserved for city vehicles, noon to 6 p.m., school days only. And then there's a 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., third Wednesday each month, street sweeping. That is currently what is,
Isn't that the last couple of spaces worth on Masonic? I don't think it's extensive. I think it's just,
I think it's 2 to 3 spaces.
yeah.
And do we
And then the
know,
rest is just unsigned curb.
I believe so.
do we know if there are city vehicles that need that space? Like, what is that for? What's the intended purpose of it? Does anyone know?
I'm sorry, I don't know.
When it's audience comment time, I may be able to shed
Okay.
light on this.
We'll wait for your comment then. Thank you. Susan, did you have any other questions?
Not right now.
Harry? How many staff are you expecting to house in the annex with the elementary students?
A total of 20, around 20 staff. Now remember, 12 are teachers. We will have some admin staff and unfortunately one principal who's going to go back and forth quite a bit. But there's also staff that's going to be traveling, and that are our support staff. So there may be a secretary there, but there's also support staff that will be coming in and out as well.
Are there any, I don't believe there are any parking spaces on the annex property. It's a gated.
That is correct. There are no parking spaces on there.
Is there bike parking for whoever is using that property on the annex? And how many spaces are there?
Yes, there's bike parking, and I'm going to look to Alice to help me with the number of spaces.
Hi, I'm Alice Chang with DCA. There are bike parking, but it's on the main campus of the middle school, not specifically on the annex site.
So are you expecting elementary students to park on the other side of the street and make their way across?
We actually are making some alternative plans for the use of the existing outdoor area, so we haven't discussed that specific item. There probably will be some temporary bike storage on the annex site, but it wouldn't be for long-term.
Okay. When you say long-term, it looks like you'll be using the annex site for elementary schools for at least 4 years.
Yeah.
It depends. I mean, I hate to give you kind of the vague answer. The current plans are right now to house grades 1 through 3 for Ocean View Elementary. Depending on what happens with the actual build-out of Ocean View, we might be able to look at alternative plans. So the answer could be, and the answer is it could not be as well.
But is it safe to assume that when you say short-term temporary bike parking on the annex, your intention is that as long as the annex is occupied by elementary school students, however long that may be, that temporary bike parking would remain in place on the annex?
Yes, we would make. I would say we would make every opportunity to try to make that happen. And again, when the annex turns over back to Albany Middle School, we would just engage in conversations with principal to see if there's a need to have biking on that bike area in that area as well in the annex. But that's a conversation I would definitely have with Deborah.
I actually have another question. What is the reasoning behind the 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. time range for the afternoon enforcement of the white zone? School actually lets out after 3 p.m., right?
So for the temporary space, remember too that grades 1, 2, and 3 are also currently on an early bird, late bird schedule, so there's a little bit of a change there. In terms of long-term, I don't know, Deb, if you want to help me out with the 2 to 3 time zone for drop-off pickup. Till 3:15? Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat what she said?
It would probably need to go to 3:15.
So your proposal would be to change that?
You'd have to come up and talk. Yeah, come up here.
Actually, while she's coming up, I'm looking online at the bell schedule, and there's an end of quarter schedule that ends at 1:50. There's a conference schedule that ends at 1:50. So there's a range of afternoon times. We'd love to make the sign inclusive of
Right, so if you're trying to be inclusive of all possible release times, then it would probably need to start at, 1:40, because our earliest release is 1:50, but that's only, 2 weeks, about a total of 3 weeks during the year, so, and then all of the other days, Wednesdays 2:10, right, and then, so yeah, I guess it depends on whether we're trying to be inclusive of everything. If we are, then it would be quite a bit earlier, right, it would be 1:40 all the way through.
And the latest time is 3:05?
3:05 is our normal dismissal on a regular week that's not a Wednesday.
Okay, so if we wanted to round it to the half hour and include all possible drop-off times, it seems like 1:30 to 3:30 would be the inclusive range.
Right, I don't know if it's important to round to the half hour. It seems like letting people park there starting at 3:15 makes a lot of sense, because there's really no pickup, that's when everyone's cleared out by then. But if the half an hour matters, then yes.
Okay.
So can you speak a little bit about how you plan to deal with the arrival and pickup offset, or hopefully an offset between the schools?
So you asked very good questions. It is going to be a challenge. It is going to be a challenge because we have an early bird, late bird schedule, plus we also have when the middle school students will be coming, which is why we wanted to add the drop-off on this side, because then you'd have our elementary students going to the annex, they would be doing the drop-off here, and then the middle school students would have the drop-off here.
There's a theater building in the new annex. Is there potential for having middle school students using that facility during this time?
Boy, I keep hating to say the "it depends" answer. During the day, the plan is to be using that drama room as well as the computer lab for our elementary students, and that's because we're going to need to have, if there's rainy day lunch, recess, PE, grade level assemblies, those spaces are going to be needed. After hours, it's possible.
Okay. I think we want to consider the eventual use as well, and presumably that includes middle school students crossing back and forth during the day, during the period changes.
Yes.
Okay. Last time you were here in July, you showed us a diagram just of the intersection at Brighton and San Gabriel.
Yes.
And we had some suggestions for you.
You did. I had some suggestions too.
Keep it on an even keel here. So given your suggestions and our suggestions, did you have a chance to work on those at all?
We did, and maybe Juan can come and help me. I think one of the suggestions we had originally talked about was, could we have this sort of being raised so that traffic would slow down? And my understanding was that it was probably not in the best interest for fire engines that have to kind of go through. I like the idea about
Is that something you explored with the fire department?
No, actually, I thought we heard it here at a meeting that I thought I heard. Maybe I heard it wrong. Was that to have it? No. Oh, okay.
No, that can be constructed quite well for fire engines. And in fact, they would probably prefer it to a pair of raised crosswalks.
Okay, so the other, I'll have to think about that. I have a follow-up question to that, though, if you don't mind.
I was asking the questions.
Okay, so
keep going.
I know, I'm sorry.
Oh, keep going. Keep going.
So the other thing that I was considering is, we have middle school students who will be crossing here, here, and here, and so the question I'd ask was, could all of this be sort of striped as a just as one big sort of block crossing area? And I apologize, I don't know anything about how traffic code works, do we have to, whether it's a raised, if this is raised or if this is striped, do we have to then have a actual traffic light, a traffic signal? And so anything that helps our students be more safe, and that people who are driving through there know to slow down, I think would help. I like the idea of the flashing stop signs. I don't know, again, what the requirements are in terms of traffic code if we do this either raised or striped over. I mean, I think if, I mean, I'll look to our two principals. I think if that area were raised and it slows traffic down, that's going to be a positive.
I'm not a traffic engineer. Perhaps staff can address the issue of what it takes to cross on a diagonal in an intersection.
I don't know the rules regarding a stop sign controlled, like full scramble. I know you can do that with a signalized intersection. I'd have to look if that's permitted as a stop sign controlled.
Do you know if there's similar restrictions, requirements if you raise this this square area, so it slows people down?
That would not affect how you striped it. I think the raised could be done independent of whether you had to maintain the straight crosswalks or did a full scramble. I know Oakland has done sort of artwork at intersections. I don't know that they've, including, I believe, stop sign controlled intersections as a calming and an art installation. I don't know if they've included the full scramble in those patterns or it's just for visual cue.
Thank you. So you're bringing a large number of staff to this area that's presumably already somewhat impacted. I know you have portables on the parking lot at the current middle school. Do you offer any kind of carpooling incentive or active transportation or transit incentives to your employees? Or would you consider doing so as part of this project?
So I can actually answer the second half of the question easier than the first half, because the first half I'm not sure if we have offered it, but I do know that we've looked into it because there was a year when there was it became a law that says you need to offer. So I believe that happened, but I don't know if we actually offer it. I would have to check into that.
And is your current parking for staff full?
There is no parking for staff because right now we have 4 portables that are on the faculty parking lot at this point.
Okay.
Eventually, once both Marin and Ocean View are built and those portables are removed, then there are staff spaces. There's a few spaces way in the back, but that is usually where our AOSD vans, they go in, they pick up kids, they turn around. So it's part of our transportation. And I'm not sure if all of the parking spaces in that area will hold the entire AMS staff. I don't think it does. It does not.
Currently, there's only one ADA handicap spot on the diagram.
Yes.
Is that the appropriate amount legally? Is it the appropriate amount in general?
Yes, I believe we meet the legal requirements for handicap. I may have to defer to Juan and Alice on this.
So currently, where we're proposing to do the red striping to the northwest of the crosswalk at Brighton and San Gabriel, is the designated accessible spot. However, it's not accessible. So we're proposing to cut into the sidewalk and provide a Caltrans acceptable or City of Albany accessible spot. That would include a path behind the car or in front of the car to get up a ramp to the sidewalk level.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does that same spot serve the annex?
It does. We don't have the luxury of doing that on the annex site. As you know, it's very constrained. But it's thought to be one project, and we need to designate one main entrance, which is thought to be on the northern campus. So as long as we have one accessible spot within 200 feet of the main entrance, we feel we meet that requirement. Having said that, we do have accessible stalls in the existing parking lot. Unfortunately, it's offline at this time, so I think it becomes more important to provide the truly accessible spot on the street, or on-street parking, I should say.
Okay. Any other questions from the commission?
I apologize, I'm going to ask you another nitpicky question about the white zones. I've seen some white zones where the posted rule is something like 3-minute parking, and other white zones where it's pick up and drop off only, implying that the car has to remain occupied. Do you have an intention for which kind of white zone these are going to be? I know it may affect parents who intend to park and go find their kid, and then,
Sure.
especially in the afternoon. I don't think it matters much in the morning. But
Yeah,
in the
no,
afternoon, someone might want to park and go meet up with their kid and then bring them back to the car.
So currently, the 8 spaces that are west of San Gabriel are not painted white. It's not clear because the signs face out to the street, facing south, basically. But the sign does say 3-minute limited parking. Also, with the Annex being a CHIPS verified project, we're also limited to having the engines idle for no more than 3 minutes. So we'll be clarifying that on signage in the future to make it really absolutely clear that it is designated just for drop-off during those hours, and that the rest of the time it's available for parking.
So it really isn't a white zone in the traditional sense of passenger drop-off and pickup only. It's actually a very short-term parking space.
Yes, we're talking about, a few hours during the course of the day.
No, but even during the hours it's enforced, it's a 3-minute parking space where the car can be turned off and unoccupied during those 3 minutes, technically.
That's
You
correct.
can turn off your car and get out of the car as long as you come
as long
back
as it's
and
within the
move it away
3-minute time
within-
zone, yeah. But I think the intent is just to do the drop-off and pickup. We write 3 minutes so that we make it really clear that they can't stay in that area during those
Okay, I
hours.
guess my expectation would be if it says 3-minute parking only, that if I'm sitting in the car, I could sit there as long as I want. But that's not your intention.
And that's not happening. I mean, we observe the traffic patterns and we observe the children coming out, and people are driving off. They drop their children off and they drive off.
I could see that in the morning, but in the afternoon, I think it's a different situation because you don't know when your kid is going to come out. If you happen to be lucky enough to find one of those spaces, you might pull into it and wait for 10 minutes for your kid to arrive. Or you might get out of the car to go find your kid, and that's where I'm trying to figure out what do your rules actually say about that behavior? What do they permit and what do they try to prevent?
If I could add to that too, I think the temporary condition for the elementary school, I think the drop-off is a little bit different where parents, particularly of, I think, younger kids, right, by kindergarten and first grade, I think many get out of their car, I believe, and then walk their kids to line up, right, for the AM bell. So it's a little bit different, I think, than middle school activity.
Yeah, that's true too.
Well, I think that, we would be open to any language that you might suggest to preclude parking. That's not the intent. We really do want cars to swiftly move through the drop-off zone, and if that children need to be walked in, that they would park their car and walk their children in.
Have we exhausted our questions for now? All right. With that, I would like to turn it over to public comment. Please, let's see. I think the best way to do this is to ask the applicants to sit down. We'll ask the people who want to comment to line up along the closet over by the screen. We have comment cards. I get frustrated with that process.
You want to just...
I want a free form.
Okay.
We okay
Just
with
so
that?
you know, I have so far 14.
14, okay. So that would be
42 minutes.
42 minutes of. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have 14 comment cards. I'm going to limit public comment to 2 minutes each. And I'm sorry, we have other items we have to consider tonight. We may not be making a final decision on this evening. And you would have a chance, if that is true, to write in or to come to another meeting. We do have other matters we need to consider. So now, if you only have 1 minute to speak, or 1 minute that you'd like to speak, you could cede that other minute to somebody else in line. So I'll give you that flexibility. And we're not going to respond to your comments immediately. We're going to be taking notes, and we will go through any questions after public comment is taken. With that, would you please step up to the microphone?
Thank you. My name is Christina Hohorst. I'm taking my husband's time. He's Stephen Hohorst. It's impolite to bring out your credentials, but I am a professional transportation planner, and I work at the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. I also live directly across the street from the new proposed loading zone. I also work on streets and roads projects at the Metropolitan Transportation Commission. My comments are first that Brighton is a collector's street, as I understand it. San Gabriel's a residential street. A collector is created to collect traffic to take it onto arterials, which is San Pablo. I think it's inappropriate to have drop-offs on a residential street. Again, I think you have to consider the density of the corner. There's an apartment building and there's also a street with cottages. It's high density. And when people leave in the morning, I'm someone who leaves, I take transit. Sometimes I stay and leave at around the time that school drop-offs are happening. And the residents of San Gabriel are trapped by trying to get out. There's no point in going to Brighton because of all of the traffic from all of the drop-offs on the Collector Street. But also if you turn right, what's not considered is that there's high school traffic that also prevents folks from leaving from Portland. You can't make a left turn on Portland at the time that the high schoolers are going to school, and it's difficult to make a right turn and then a left onto Key Route. So I think that it's appropriate to consider the traffic patterns for the entire area because the high school traffic also affects the traffic on San Gabriel. When my daughter was at the middle school, they sent us a notice. We were told you couldn't have drop-offs on Spokane. So the residents of Spokane have asked that folks don't use Spokane to drop kids off at the middle school. Additionally, parking, I think, should be kept for the middle school employees and for the parents. So the loading zone on San Gabriel, I think, is inappropriate because there isn't any parking, and a lot of those employees park there. Additionally, if we're kind of a transit first place and we want to support transit, I think that it's important to discourage parents from driving their kids and dropping them off. And when you're talking about kids from 1st to 3rd grade, those kids are typically walked into the school. I know I did it when my daughter went to Marin. I parked my car far away from the school and I walked her in to make sure she was safe. Additionally, for our elementary schools, I'm proud to live in Albany. We have crossing guards, and I think that that's very important, particularly if you have such young children. Let's see, the fact that we prioritize cars, the survey, I want to make comments on the survey. San Gabriel, Brighton drop-offs, if you look at it, happen at about 4%. 57% are going down Brighton westbound. The rest are going, about 40% are going eastbound. So most of the drop-offs aren't happening at San Gabriel and Brighton, and I don't know why we would add them even though the annex is opening, because I think that it's just not it's something that has to be further studied, because I know that this is a challenge for you, and I also want these kids to be safe. My second point about the survey is that the observations were made on one Friday. Friday is a light day. I think that if you're going to make observations, they should be on multiple days, and they should be on days of the week that most people are there, like Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Additionally, I don't think, Ryan Schaefer at NCE, he spoke to the people affected by I-80, the I-80 and Central project. I think it's critical that the people in the apartment building and that the cottages all be spoken to individually about the potential impacts of leaving to work and coming back, because economically it's important that these people get to work, and those people aren't homeowners. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you for your very specific comments. Please hold your applause. We want to keep moving. Next.
Ellen Hershey, I live on Spokane Avenue, across the street from the middle school. I am concerned, thank you to the city and the school district for their attention to the issue. Mr. Freed, thank you for coming out to observe school drop-off, morning drop-off time. I want to confirm some of the commissioners' comments that afternoon pickup time is somewhat different because people do come and either park or idle their cars while they're waiting for their student to come out from the school, or they even park or double park and go in to look for their student. And so congestion in the afternoon pickup time may actually be even worse than drop-off time. Also, having lived there in front of the school for 20 years, I can tell you that rainy days are definitely going to be worse. This is relevant because I am concerned on looking at the current plan that the amount of passenger loading zones for this number of students at the two schools may not be sufficient. And the reason I say that is that my goal, looking at Mr. Freed's data, would be to try to cut down significantly, if not eliminate, the driving behavior where parents are stopping in the traffic lane rather than pulling to the curb and letting their students off in the traffic lane, because to me that's a basic safety issue for students. And so I believe there must be expertise out there that says how much passenger loading zone you need for schools of this size. The north end of Masonic was 20 years ago, the traffic engineers recommended that that be added as an additional passenger loading zone. And so it needs to be considered.
All right.
Paul Charest, 643 San Gabriel. I would prefer not to live on a one-way street.
You can bend the microphone up, sir.
I would prefer not to live on a one-way street. When there's garbage trucks coming, like there will be tomorrow, I like to get in my car and go the opposite direction of the garbage truck. If it's a one-way street, I won't be able to do it. I would like the parking left alone on San Gabriel and have the kids dropped off on Brighton or Masonic, which are bigger streets than San Gabriel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jane Sellen. I live at 624 San Gabriel Avenue, across from the new middle school annex. I want to express my strong opposition. I'd like you to consider the impact your plan will have on our already overburdened residential street. I didn't hear any mention in your presentation of neighborhood impact. The last 100 yards or so at the north end of San Gabriel, where it intersects with Brighton, is some of the densest housing anywhere in Albany, including a 3-story, 60-unit apartment building and a cul-de-sac with 17 townhomes. The stretch of San Gabriel alongside the new middle school annex provides essential overflow parking for the north end of the street. It's almost always full of cars. I'm extremely concerned by the proposal to turn this stretch of parking into student drop-off zone instead of Brighton Avenue east of San Gabriel, where there are no houses and where drop-offs are already happening. My concerns are twofold, of course, traffic and parking. First, traffic. We already get more than our fair share of school traffic, but once you place the drop-off zone there, you're basically funneling all of the traffic down a residential street. Just learned of your plan to use the annex for the elementary schools. Anyone who's ever gotten stuck in Ocean View traffic knows what a nightmare that's going to be once that traffic's added to the existing traffic. Secondly, parking. There's already a shortage of parking on our street. We've just lost some parking to the new fire hydrant, and the plan to add a school drop-off zone on San Gabriel will permanently eliminate 5 spaces. Add to that all the additional teachers from the elementary schools who'll be parking on the street all day. You're creating real problems for those of us who live here and, by the way, pay massive property taxes for the privilege of doing so. I'm no traffic engineer, but it seems to me the obvious solution is to put the drop-off zone on Brighton Street east of San Gabriel and let the traffic flow on from there via key route Spokane. San Gabriel will still bear a heavy traffic load as it has done for years, but perhaps without an undue additional burden. And finally, I don't know if you have or are planning to have a community advisory board to guide you as you finalize your decision making. It's going to have a profound impact on the quality of life in our neighborhood. Perhaps you should consider it, and I'll volunteer to be on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Guy Worthington. I also live on San Gabriel Street and been there for 16 years, and it is a heavily trafficked street. It's quite a mess, as probably a few of the council members know this already. What has shocked me about this plan is, I wish we had a mic to pick up. I don't know if I can use that one. Or a pointer over here. You've got a 60-unit apartment building right there. That apartment building has 1 and 2 bedroom units, 60 parking spaces, 60. Everyone's got a car, maybe one and a half, all right? And you've also got 16 units right below it, or 17 units, tiny garages, which nobody uses anymore for their cars, and not enough space for 16 is if everyone has one car, but you know it's more than that, so it's actually probably 24 or more. These people park all the time on San Gabriel and really add to the traffic burden. I mean, just the parking space burden. And what absolutely appalled me, I've just learned today, was the school has, what was it, 60 teachers, not to mention 90 staff, and there's going to be another 20 teachers and staff coming into the annex. And right now, in the next 4+ years, 0 parking spaces for that staff. That blows my mind. Now, I don't know if we have any residents here from the apartments, because the notification that was received on San Gabriel of this came really late and poor. And we've done some work to try and get the word out. Is anyone here from the large apartment complex? Will you raise your hand? Thank you for coming. And anyone from the Muse, thank you for coming. So the notification, I don't think you've really got a measure of the number of people who are concerned about the issue that this raises, and also the shortcomings of the planning for the parking of the staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Linda Gaydon, my husband Joe, and we are the second oldest living family resident on San Gabriel. I was saddened when they tore down McGregor, or at least didn't leave a plaque. In my mind, it was historical, as well as Ellis Olson Mortuary. I mean, I would like an answer from the city of Albany. Key Route Boulevard is very, very wide, and so is, I mean, comparatively speaking to our little street, San Gabriel. Masonic is wide, and as you're going from Solano down, over to the right, there's no homes. It's not residential. There's houses on the other side of the street. I do not see the Albany City facility trucks. I'm sure they could have easy access if they needed to be in that area to go into the middle school's gate, have keys to get in or whatever, and make a bigger space on Masonic, and also something I believe could be done on Key Route Boulevard. I know when I was a child, I know it's all different now, but I walked all over this town as a little girl. And anyway, our street, in a nutshell, is far too congested. And this is just, it's gonna make it really dangerous and very unpleasant for myself, my family, and all of my neighbors. And I would like you to really rethink your plan. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you. My name's Linda Filchev, and I'm a resident, long-term 15-year resident of San Gabriel on the north end, quite near the proposed passenger loading zone, which I vehemently oppose. And I'm going to address a couple of things that haven't been discussed so far. And the first has to do with the 2 apartment buildings. If you notice, there are, in the 60 unit and the 17 unit, there are 2 driveways that feed right onto San Gabriel, including one that's directly perpendicular to the passenger loading zone. So what you're going to have when people are dropping their kids off at 8 a.m., 8:30 in the morning are people backing out of the Muse and driving out of this apartment building. We're talking about a total of about 80 cars. I would imagine a significant number of those vehicles are going to be getting onto San Gabriel around that time when people go to work, drop off their kids, do errands, etc. So from my perspective, just having lived on the street and seen this whole thing unfold to date, and what the traffic problem is already like, from my perspective, this is really a disaster. And a safety hazard, both for the people on the street, the residents, the people in the units, the people who drive this street, and also for the children. To put kids, it's already an overburdened stretch. It's already gridlocked. If I try to get out of this street to this intersection or to Portland during school hours, invariably I will sit in gridlock. And I'm not talking a couple of minutes, I'm talking Manhattan type of gridlock in the middle of the afternoon in Albany. You can sit there for 5 minutes. You know, there's no traffic light, the kids cross, you're waiting, you're gridlocked. So that's what we're adding to with this proposal. There are other spaces, as people have pointed out, in less trafficked areas. Thank you.
I'll ask you to hold the clapping, please. We want to keep moving.
Hello, my name is Deborah Oakes, and I live at 612 San Gabriel Avenue. I'm Linda Felshev's neighbor. I agree totally with everything she just said. This will cause chaos on our street, and I think the best place to put this passenger loading zone would be on Brighton Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Kendra Pullen. I live at 649 San Gabriel. I'm one of probably the newest residents of that block. However, I have also experienced a great deal of pain and heartache from the traffic patterns, and I'm also shocked at the lack of publicity about what is being proposed. I'm certainly hopeful that some of these comments are taken to heart and that we can maybe consider other surveys and do other analysis of the whole entire neighborhood. Like Key Route, like Brighton, like Masonic Avenue, I'm terrified. I have 2 small boys. I'm terrified of the idea of how many late parents are going to be racing up and down San Gabriel, frightening me and my spouse and putting my kids' lives at risk. The street, it cannot accommodate what is being considered. And I think that's just the ultimate thing. I think the whole neighborhood as a whole should be looked at. Everything from Portland to Brighton to San Gabriel to Masonic to Spokane to all of that, not just one street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Karen Garner, and I live at 645 San Gabriel. And I just want to thank all of my neighbors for bringing up these wonderful things that they've said. I totally agree with them. We live with the traffic and the parking issues on a daily basis, and I can't even imagine considering making it a one-way street, whether it's one-way north or south. That would be a total nightmare. I leave for work in the morning at the same time that the parents are driving their kids, and I never go the Brighton direction. I always go the other way. And it's true, it is impacted by the high school students going to school at that time too, but it's not as much of a dangerous situation as it is on Brighton. As far as the parking, I don't know whether it's staff, it probably is staff that every day I have 2 spaces in front of my house and there's always somebody parked there from the time I leave until the time I get home. I sometimes come home to lunch and it's always parked solid. So I can't imagine our street taking any more responsibility for, more parking than we can handle now. So that's my concern. And also the fire trucks and ambulance access, if it was a one-way street, one way or the other. And on recycling day, it would be another total nightmare. So please listen to the residents. We all understand that school has its issues, but we matter too. So thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian DeLay. I live at 631 San Gabriel, and I agree with almost everything that my neighbors have said. It's a very difficult street, far more so than most streets in Albany, and I think the proposal would make it much worse. The worst idea that I read in here was the possibility of making it a one-way street that goes north. And I think, people leaving to go to work, heading for the nightmare zone here, all in red, would just be a terrible, terrible idea. And the best idea of all the good ideas that I heard up here tonight was from Linda Gaeta, who suggested that we use the east side of Masonic for a lot of these purposes. I understand that it's not appropriate to have that be a drop, or useful for that to be a drop-off for elementary school kids, but I think it's totally appropriate for middle school kids to be dropped off there. And there are no houses there. It's right underneath the BART tracks. I would like to see the city, again, think more comprehensively about the entire area and be more sensitive to how impacted San Gabriel already is. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Amy Smolens, Albany Strollers and Rollers, trying to look a little more big picture, Albany and climate change. Albany's 1 square mile and we have temperate weather. It's not Hawaii, but it's still pretty temperate, and kids can ride and walk and scoot to school year-round, so we should be encouraging that, not just during bike month. So the new bike racks at Albany Middle School, Albany Strollers and Rollers organized and funded, and we organized and funded them based upon the needs of middle school, not based upon the needs of another campus across the street. So there need to be dedicated bike racks across the street, and that needs to be permanent or 4 years or whatever that is at a secure location. Bay Area Air Quality Management and Safe Routes to School both have grants for public agencies for bike racks, and I know that Berkeley has taken advantage of those, Richmond has taken advantage of those. We can't get them, we're a private company. You can, private organization, you guys can apply for those and receive grants for bike racks. We can help you with the planning, and if you need some help financially, we can try to help fund it. But let's try to encourage kids to walk and roll to school 12 months a year, right? Will help. Thanks. Ceding the rest of my time to Britt Tanner.
Okay, I am Britt Tanner. I live at 635 San Gabriel. I will expect my house to get egged when I'm done speaking. I am a parent of a 1st and a 4th grader. I own a car. I park on the street. I'm also a traffic engineer and formerly the school safety program manager for San Francisco. This is a no-brainer, what you guys are proposing. You should go for it. Adding a white zone on the east side of Masonic, it does make sense, but we still need to have a white zone on my street, 100 feet away from my house, because you're going to have 900 students at the middle school and 300 students at the elementary school, and you cannot put 33% more cars dropping off people on Brighton, because Brighton is already impacted. I also suggest that you do a number of other things to reduce the impact on my street. There should be organized walking school buses. You should have better bike education and permanent bike racks that would stay after the use of the temporary use for the schools. I don't know whatever happened to the contraflow suggestion that was going on Brighton. There was going to be a contraflow path going from the Albany Greenway up to the parking lot. There should be a plan for staff parking, but I highly recommend pursuing the white zone on Masonic, because the middle school kids can use it, but you will still need to have the white zone on San Gabriel. I strongly believe that a raised intersection would make a lot of sense and should not have any problems with the fire department. I particularly want you to pursue that recommendation because there are a lot of U-turns that people make at Brighton, and particularly when you add the red zones, more people will make U-turns. So please do something at that intersection, because U-turns will increase when you do this. I understand there are concerns from my neighbors about having a white zone on our street, and I think perhaps a temporary measure could be to have that be a temporary white zone only during the time that it is in elementary school.
30 seconds. Okay.
So I have another 40 seconds. I also would like to remind people that there was a white zone on our street before the construction started. There was a white zone on San Gabriel. You're reinstating something that was already there at a slightly different location because it was at the corner. It was, I think, 3 cars worth. So this is only making it 5 cars, which is taking 2 cars away from the other one on Brighton. So it's not new. Don't do the scramble at the stop sign. Bad idea, traffic engineer speaking. Please look at the private driveway on the other side of the street where there's the cul-de-sac with the other houses, because it is not accessible. The curb ramps are not accessible there, and I have problems with that all the time, and it's really across the street from the school. It should be accessible. Do enforce the white zones more. They are not.
I'm sorry, Britt, where was that you just mentioned that wasn't accessible? Thank you.
I complained about that 6 months ago and did not get a response. And by the way, the notification was fine. I got something in the mail 2 weeks ago. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Saya Faraktala. I'm actually the trustee for the apartment complex across the street, the 60 units. Our residents did receive the notice, but it was last week. None of them are going to show up. They have no interest in this. I mean, they could, but we have 1s, 2s, and 3s. We are a 60-unit property. Most of our households, if not almost all of them, have 2 cars. Some households have 3. We have multiple roommate situations, and as it is, very, very small spaces, and we're parking restricted even though each unit has a parking spot. It's never sufficient for, I mean, you can barely get out of your door. I mean, you really do need a can opener. So a lot of people don't park in their parking spots because of this reason. I will have a first grader over at the Annex, so I feel the pain of all of these folks here because it is a nightmare in the morning. I don't leave at lunchtime because it does get gridlocked in the neighborhood at lunch, and especially in the morning, I avoid it. Our recommendation is that we do a comprehensive traffic study for including the high school. It's willy-nilly in the morning if you have children and you're driving them to school. I mean, you do get gridlocked behind tons of high school students or parents walking their kids to school, and I would never drop off my child at the curb and say, see you later, Weston. I love the idea of the raised crosswalks, but at off hours after school, nobody uses that stop sign. They fly through it, and I'm afraid that that would turn into some sort of launch ramp for fun, because it is a very straight, a quick way for people to get out. So perhaps another alternative, the double raised crosswalks would be great. But overall, I think more study needs to be done on this. Much more study needs to be done on this to alleviate the problem for everybody in Albany.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That seems to be it for public comment. Thank you all, and thank you for shortening your comments. We appreciate it. I think you did a great job of being succinct. So I'm going to bring this back to the commission. And Val, perhaps you could stand back up at the microphone. And you guys want me to start going through some of the questions, or? Yeah?
Yeah, go for it.
Let's see. One thing that came up was that it's an elementary school. The elementary schools have crossing guards. Do you project to use any of the crossing guards that are currently allocated in our system at this location?
I am considering that. I'm also considering whether we might need to temporarily increase staff.
Okay. But you don't have a plan for that at this time?
I don't have a decision for that at this time.
Okay. Most of what I got were actually statements, so I think that's it for the questions that I recorded. Did anybody else record questions that need to be?
There was a question, I think, from the resident on Spokane about how much loading zone is needed for a school of this size. Or how do we determine if it's 8 spaces or 5 spaces or higher?
I'm going to maybe have to turn the technical piece back over to Juan and to Alice, but I do want to add one piece. The parent drop-off zone idea right now on Masonic, my understanding is that there are not that many parents, middle school parents right now, who utilize that area. Some, I think, do, not many. To ask grades 1 through 3, students and parents to walk from Masonic to the Annex. I'm not sure that would happen either. I think what will probably end up happening is that they will drop their children off closer to Brighton and San Gabriel. As to how many we need to have, Juan, could you help me with that question, please?
Good evening, everyone. Juan Brosa with DCA. So we didn't look at that specifically to try to calculate what the appropriate number or length of drop-off zone would be. When we first looked at the project, we had a transportation engineer advise us on what the best measures would be to address student safety. We consulted with the Department of Education. We also shared that study with the city, and this goes back a year. So we did go through a process, but we didn't look at that question specifically. We could look at that and bring that back.
Robert, do you have any others?
I think you probably have the comments. I don't know if it's a comment or a question about type of traffic study that was done and how broad.
Sorry, about what?
The type of traffic study that was done and how broad, which was probably done for the project initially, I would guess.
So can you tell us how broad the traffic study was that was done?
So the study that we did, I wouldn't call it a traffic study. I wouldn't characterize it as a full-blown traffic study. We did hire a firm, Michael Baker International, who did a more of a pedestrian traffic study to try to really focus more on student safety around the school as we were looking at the construction of the annex. So that study was reviewed with the city. It was also reviewed by the California Department of Education. It had a number of options of mitigations to ensure student safety. I believe this, if there was three options, option 1, 2, and 3, 3 being the more extreme that may have considered things like elevating the intersection. We arrived at number 2, felt it was an appropriate level of safety for the students. Also considered cost. There's a lot more we could do. But there is sort of a project budget that we're trying to work within. So we arrived at this option through a lot of study.
So comments from the commission?
So I don't know if this was a question, but it was put as a statement, but I would like to know from the school. So was there a white zone there prior? This piece I was missing.
You want the, you want my little clicker thing?
Currently, the white zone takes up 8 parking spaces, basically west of the crosswalk.
Okay.
On Brighton?
On Brighton.
Were you asking about San Gabriel?
Yes.
And the history of that?
Yes.
Yeah, that I'm not actually aware of.
Okay.
I believe that there might have been, but I just can't confirm that.
I happen to know.
There was?
There was a small parking zone at the top of San Gabriel where the red zone is, about that size, probably 2 spaces.
So about 2 spaces of red zone. I'm repeating for the record.
It was white, whatever.
Oh, it was white.
Which I thought was convenient because it gave more visibility to the crosswalk.
So, sir, you were reporting some fact. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
So the observation is that the prior white zone occupied about the same space as the current red zone. So removing that white zone approximately. So
I don't think that's quite right, but there were a couple of spaces of white zone near the corner with Brighton on San Gabriel.
And in the new proposal, that has to be red zone for safety reasons. So.
And the main entrance to the school is actually located further south.
And yeah, it's not in the right place, but in terms of balancing the net gain and loss of parking, it's going to feel to the neighborhood like a loss of parking because compared to the way it used to be before the construction.
Got it.
Other comments from the commission? Harry?
Well, I want to just brainstorm a little bit about the difference between what drop-off and pickup look like for little kids and bigger kids, and I have a son who has some special needs, and I'm not sure if my experience working with him on drop-off and pickup behavior is typical. So I guess I want to take a minute to describe my experience and then ask the commission if, to the extent that you have children or have observed this, if it seems typical to you. So we're not really talking about 4th and 5th graders here. We're talking about the youngest kids, 1 to 3, and we're talking about middle schoolers. And for me, there was a very big difference in my experience of drop-off and pickup at those ages. In grades 1 to 3, I considered that my kid needed to be under adult supervision all the time. And that could be because of his age, it could be because of his particular needs, but my pattern was to find a parking space, park the car, walk with him to a place where there was some adult who, and he did have a individual aide for much of his elementary school, where there was either some adult or where he was just with a group of kids that he knew who were standing and waiting in line to enter the class. And that was a fairly organized group of kids where he could be left. At the end of school, we would actually park the car and go walk to the front door of the classroom where he was coming out, meet him and walk with him back to the car. So for that purpose, a white zone was not really useful to me. You can't leave your car in a white zone and walk with your kid or go find your kid. I think we've talked about maybe having the white zone be available for 3-minute parking, and maybe that would be enough, but it seems dicey, and so at least for me personally, a white zone for elementary schools is kind of beside the point. What we need for elementary schools is just availability of general street parking that's within a long block or so. It doesn't have to be right in front of the school. It's helpful if it's close. For middle school, it's a very different story, at least for the drop-off. I kind of did 2 different things. If I was organized enough to get going and be 5 minutes early, I tended to drop my son off at Masonic and Garfield. And he would have a 5-minute walk to get to school. He could do that on his own by that age. I'm sure most kids who don't have special needs can certainly do that on their own by that age. And I would then be able to turn my car so that I never even had to enter the congested zone. And I have to say the parking along the east side of Masonic is very, very severely underused. And anybody who's concerned about availability of parking in the neighborhood, I'd strongly suggest that you look to that area and find that there's actually a vast amount of public space that is dedicated to street parking, and I suggest that you all consider using it if you find that the street parking on your particular block is full, but I'm digressing. We're asking the kids to maybe walk a couple minutes between their drop-off point and their school, and I think it's not too much to ask adults to do the same. But yeah, when it was possible, I preferred to drop him off there because it was a more relaxing drive for me, and I felt it was good for him to have the independence of walking a little bit. On the other hand, there were days when we simply didn't get started with enough time to do that, and we had to use the white zone right in front of the school just because of time constraints. And I was disappointed in myself when that happened because I favored the idea of a little bit more active transportation, getting him to bike to school when he could, getting him to walk a little bit when he could. But I guess what I would hope is that the school could find some way to go farther in encouraging parents to do more of that slightly off-campus drop-off. Because I have to assume there's a large number of parents who are doing the right in front of the door drop-off who don't really need to, or at least don't need to do it every day. And I don't know what the technique is, but I would just like to see a little bit more creative thinking on the part of both the city and the school about how can we get people to use this white zone a little bit more efficiently so that the people who actually need it at a particular moment because they're running late or because their kid is carrying a heavy suitcase for some reason that day or whatever the reason is.
Musical instrument.
Musical instrument can use it, and the ones who don't need it don't have to use it. In the afternoon, it's a whole different story, and I think the fact that the white zone is timed from 2 to 3 p.m. is kind of indicative of how poorly thought out the afternoon pickup is. That's not when school gets out most days. A white zone isn't really the appropriate space for school pickup. I don't know how people use a white zone in the afternoon. The way I used it in the morning was that I would pull into the space, my kid would get out, I would pull out. That's the appropriate use of a white zone. In the afternoon, you can't really do that, and I'm not sure how the white zone is useful or how we could make it more useful. So I'm interested in hearing people's thoughts. Is a white zone for elementary schools useful at all? Is a white zone for afternoon use for middle school kids useful? How can we make it more useful? How can we create a little more incentive for people to spread out a little bit and avoid clustering quite so much right at the front entrance? And how can we encourage the people on San Gabriel who feel overburdened by lack of parking to open their horizons a bit and see the extreme excess of available parking in their neighborhood? So I don't really have any answers to this. These are the questions that came into my mind as I was listening to all this, and I'd really like to hear everyone else's thoughts.
Just a quick clarification, Val. The grades that are going to be at the annex, and for how long? For the temporary use?
The current plan is to have grades 1 through 3 at the middle school annex, grades 4 through 5 at the high school wing once that is built.
And then while you're up there, the primary entrance to the annex is where the current passenger loading zone is? Yeah, so it's right there. Okay.
Grades 4 and 5 at the high school wing?
The new addition.
Okay.
So I think Harry's observations are pretty spot on. Definitely for the elementary school. I don't see a whole lot of use of white zones at elementary schools for the younger kids at least. And a lot of people are parking, right? Parking or taking their bike or walking, at least to Cornell where my kid goes. And then they're escorting the kid all the way to queue up in line until the teacher comes out, and then you say goodbye for the day. Middle school, I think it is a good idea to, well, one, we have to really push for alternate modes, right? We live in a 1 square mile city. There's got to be ways that we can lower our car usage to schools and anywhere in the city for that matter, which is a lot of what we try to focus on this commission. So I think all of those mitigations or attractions for alternative uses of transportation should be a no-brainer in this project. So encouraging as much walking and biking as possible, and whether those are carrots or sticks, we should come up with a program for the school and for the employees. That's also an important thing. I think if we all plan well every single day for our drop-off, then we can do things like getting to 2 blocks away and then dropping off your kids, because that's a more convenient route for yourself and for your kids. But what I observe is that it's this mad rush, right? At like 3 minutes before the bell time, right, is the peak. And I don't know how we can change that behavior from happening. And if the entrance for the San Gabriel annex is on San Gabriel, whether or not you have a passenger drop-off there, the cars are going to come. I mean, they're going to come to San Gabriel and they're going to drop off right at that front door. It's oftentimes a 15-second interaction between the car and the school and getting the kid to get out. So that's going to happen. I'm wondering if there's flexibility in that loading zone to avoid that conflict that was raised by one of the residents from across the street, so that you're not creating some sort of intersection there of 60 cars at the time period of like 8 o'clock, 8 to 8:30 or something like that. So maybe there's some wiggle room as to where that loading zone would be, especially if there was a loading zone there in the past. So yeah, I think in the interim elementary school situation, maybe it's not as critical, but I think it's going to be needed because it's going to be used either way to get people to the main entrance of the school or the annex.
Yeah, I just want to second that thought, because if you are going to drop your kid off, if you are going to have a long line of parents trying to drop their kid off without getting out of the car, I think a white zone is really essential. If you don't have that, you're going to have double parking, you're going to have people getting off on the wrong side, you're going to have all kinds of really dangerous behaviors. And if it makes parking a little inconvenient, I think the safety issue would override that. So my current thought would be we need to maximize white zone space that is useful for the middle school students. And at the moment, that means Brighton. And in the future, that might mean San Gabriel.
Yeah, that's right.
To the exclusion of having white zone for the elementary, in your mind?
I haven't yet been convinced that a white zone for elementary school is important, but I'm open to changing my mind about that if you have.
Has staff looked at that at the other schools, the white zone usage? I don't see it as any different use of curb at Cornell, at least.
There are loading zones at both Cornell and at Marin, thank you, that we recently had requests to reinforce and put up consistent signage in white zones. So the principals do see them as useful. I have not taken the time to go observe behavior there to see how it differs from the middle school behavior.
Perhaps I can speak to that. So at 10 years, Safe Routes to School volunteer, starter of programs, walking school bus, that kind of thing. The white zones do get used both before and after school. So before school, certainly with the upper grades, starting in third grade, parents are perfectly willing to meet their kids at the curb in the afternoon, and many are willing to drop their kids off second grade up. And I know I sent my child 2 blocks to school starting in third grade, both children. There are other uses in the afternoon. There are after-school programs that use the white zones. There are now specific child pickup services that are like Uber that use the white zones and meet kids in those zones. So, yeah, I think they're strongly used.
Okay, I stand corrected. Thanks for filling me in.
My experience, my experience in elementary school was similar to yours, where we walked our daughter into school because you did walk them to the homeroom group, or we went to Ocean View, so it was out on the playground, and then they'd walk in. When she hit middle school, I just wouldn't even drive in that area. I made her walk from, I would either drop off on Masonic or even further to the west on Brighton, because it definitely scares me between the middle school and then adding elementary schoolers into that area. I think if I were a parent, of an elementary school, I would try to park far away and still walk in. But even then, there's a lot of people driving. So I think the white zone I think having a white zone for first through third graders close to school is definitely needed for some children. I wouldn't, having an able-bodied child and me, I would not use it. So whether it's that long, I don't know. That I would like to know more about how you come up with how long or the space that's needed for the white zone.
My guess is that
for
it's,
that many children? I don't know.
my guess is that it's hard to do an engineering study or use national statistics or anything to determine that, because I think it is going to depend a lot on the particular community and the way people behave it'll depend on the weather. It depends on so many things. It may be that we have to try a certain length of white zone and see if it's adequate. And in my mind, a white zone is excessive if there are empty spaces in it, typically during the peak usage time. A white zone is inadequate if there are people stopping in inappropriate places, stopping in the lane and having their kid get out, making U-turns to get to a parking space on the other side so their kid can get out, dropping kids off on the wrong side and having them cross mid-block. All of those behaviors suggest to me that parents are not finding the white zone to be adequate, and they can't rely on it, and making it longer seems to me like the solution if we see that behavior. So I would hope we could make a recommendation for maybe a starting length of the white zone and then observe for 6 months and see what kind of usage it's getting and adjust its length accordingly. Is that possible?
There's no access from Masonic to walking access.
There is no legal access from Masonic and the Greenway to San Gabriel. There is a driveway that connects where the word Albany is there at the Greenway and connects to San Gabriel. It's a driveway.
But then there's also no legal crossing to get to the annex from there.
No sidewalk.
That too.
It's a driveway, right?
Val?
If the commission is going to consider sort of a pilot, so I don't know the word to use, we use things with temporary pilot, to temporarily put the loadings on there, I would recommend you do it for a year, because you have different seasons, and there were comments made by somebody, a member of the community, about what happens when it rains. So you'll pretty much get your full school year in there in terms of your seasons. So if you want to consider doing it for a temporary amount of time to study and see, I would recommend it for a year, at least a year.
Should we also look at designating that space in addition to on Masonic at Brighton? And then maybe we can think of some sort of program or incentive that would encourage the use of that, just to distribute the concentration. I don't know what that idea is right now.
Yeah, I think creating more white zone at different places on Masonic would be helpful. For me, the space right up just south of Garfield, there's a place where the Albany Greenway walking path, not the Greenway itself, but the kind of sidewalk-like path right along it, comes out right to the curb. So even on a dewy, wet morning where you don't want to walk across the grass, you can step out of the car directly onto the pavement of the Albany walking path and walk to school and keep your shoes dry. And that was my favorite place to drop my kid off. There was hardly ever anyone parked there, but it was not a white zone, and I think designating it a white zone would be helpful, just to reinforce the idea that this is a good drop-off place and that it has to be kept available as a drop-off place. And another white zone at the north end for parents who are running short on time and need to get a little closer and are just going to have to deal with the headache of that messy intersection.
Do we happen to know with the trailers that have gone in, is staff using this Masonic Avenue to park? Because the information I have, my daughter graduated from high school last year, so it's old. I mean, is there more occupancy of these parking spaces on Masonic than?
You mean the city?
I can answer that question.
City reserved space?
So I was the Safe Routes to School champion for the last 3 years at the middle school, and one of the things I did was survey some of the parking on the empty lot that the annex is going into now. And there were typically 16 to 20 cars there on a given day, presumably staff members of the district. Now, since that lot has been constructed on, all of those cars are now parked in the neighborhood. And No, nobody's done a survey of who is parking where that I'm aware of. That would be really hard to track.
No, that wasn't my question is that I remember seeing lots of empty spaces on the, east side of Masonic during that time. So, I mean, inserting some white zones and driving more of middle school or elementary school drop-off to Masonic is very sensible, in my opinion.
I actually think the competition on Masonic is between having space for parents to pull up and people who pull up after the BART lot is full and who don't have a BART permit. Because it's a fairly quick walk to the BART station.
I've done that.
And
I've done
the
it.
area around the BART station El Cerrito is permitted.
Right.
So, yeah, I've done that as well.
Yeah, I've done it.
But is there any time of day when the east side of Masonic is actually full between, say, Portland and Brighton?
I don't believe there is. I'm just saying that motorists will tend to park towards Brighton because there's an interest in getting to the BART station.
It's true. The spaces closer to Brighton are more occupied than the ones.
I'm not saying they're more important. I'm just saying that tends to be what happened. So let's see.
So I wanted to ask one more question, which came up before but wasn't really answered. There's a few spaces at the very north end of Masonic, just before Brighton, that have a special designation for city vehicles, and I think maybe Ellen said she had an answer. Ken, would you like to hear?
Yeah, I didn't hear an answer to the question. Would you like to give a brief explanation of that, or?
Can you come up to the mic?
First of all, I'd like to say that on that section of Brighton, 20 years ago, it was set up as a passenger loading zone area, and there exists today a little sign that says no parking here, it has the school drop-off and pickup hours. But nobody notices it, this diminutive little sign, and that area was never, the no parking there was never enforced. So I know, because I went there multiple times and checked during school drop-off and pickup time, and it was parked up. So of course people didn't use it. They couldn't. Now what happened was, I don't know, maybe 10 years after the school was opened, the city had an after-school program for middle school kids that was run over at Ocean View Park or something. And they would send a van around to pick those kids up. And so all of a sudden, overnight, those signs went up reserving a couple of those spaces for city vehicles. But I've never seen city vehicles there now. I don't know if they're still using it. There's also a bus shelter that was put up 20 years ago when the middle school was built at that site, because the idea was if it's a rainy afternoon, kids can wait in that bus shelter to be picked up. Never used, covered with graffiti.
Thanks.
So we can effectively get rid of that sign and change that to a white zone if that's a more effective use of that space, right?
And request enforcement.
Yeah. And it seems like even if it was going to be used for the purpose that Ellen described, a white zone is still appropriate because a van that was doing student pickup from after-school programs could pause there and pick up the students, even if it was a white zone. So yeah, I guess my preference would be to add the white zones on Masonic, and both the places that come to my mind are both the northernmost few spots near Brighton and those spots along the section just south of Garfield where the Ohlone Greenway path is adjacent. Since they're so lightly used, it seems like a low-cost solution to create a little more white zone space, and whatever amount is appropriate at the elementary school entrance.
And I'd like, I don't know who said it, I'm sure. I'd like to look to the school system to be looking for these kind of solutions in creative ways. All the schools, Ocean View too. I mean, it's like, where's an alternate spot that makes sense that we could work on, collaborate together to try to figure out, how to relieve the pressure, because it's behavior. I don't understand why everybody thinks they have to drive their kid up to the door. I mean, we are a 1.5 square mile city. We should be able to walk some of this. I mean, like, some people can't, and I get that, and we need to make provisions for it, but if we get in our mindset and we make some spaces that make sense, that are somewhat adjacent, and start to use them and push them from a school system as well as, from every one of us, I think it'll relieve the pressure on the smaller streets and things like that. But it starts with us too, for sure.
And also follow up on
We're not done discussing. Thanks.
And also follow up on the incentives for staff. You're a quarter mile from Plaza Bart. San Pablo has a bus line. We're trying to make it a really bikeable and walkable city. So we should have employees also take advantage of that.
I mean, new building in the rest of the city, I think, has to have bike provisions. I mean, it's different because of the school system, but you should be following that lead for our city, because that's what we expect.
And I do want to reinforce what Amy said about bike parking at the Annex. As long as it's an elementary school that's separate from the middle school, it needs to have bike parking on site, not expect elementary school kids to go jockey for space in the middle school bike parking lot and then walk across the street.
Okay, is it my turn? Great. I agree that the white zones could be reinforced. I think we've talked about a lot of things that the school district could do, and we haven't really addressed the concerns of the neighborhood that is concerned about the impact of the parking. I don't think there's been a trade-off there. I don't know. I'd actually like to ask the superintendent a question about timing of implementing some of these things. So the white zones, I think we have a consensus on the commission. So those, hopefully, we can affect those. You were going to show us another version of the intersection at Brighton and San Gabriel, because we had made some suggestions, including like the speed table, and we made a suggestion about blocking off the red zone within the intersection, which might also address the issue about people trying to make U-turns, going up San Gabriel and coming back down, limiting the space within the intersection and preventing drop-offs in the intersection.
So I'm
You're
looking.
giving me a blank look, so.
Hang on, I'm looking a little confused because I'm not quite understanding a couple of things you said about the red zones and blocking off. I'm sorry,
Wait,
I'm not understanding.
Let's hook
that.
up my computer. I've got the illustration. Robert, could you click?
Oh, yeah, sure.
So HDMI for the clerk. I'll try and make it brief.
Do you want me to just point to where in that visual? Or?
No, I've got the illustration from the July meeting, which I think is a lot more instructive.
That last.
No. Sorry?
Is that you?
That's not me. No, it should be a browser window. Got the cable plugged in.
I'm not sure if that looks live.
Can we switch from the other computer that's at the podium?
You mean run the,
With the cable? Can you?
this is plugged into?
Those HDMI.
Oh, it's plugged into the.
Yeah, that's not the right spot.
Oh, is it not?
This is the cable. I'll hold the end, so pull. Sorry.
Okay.
There used to be a plug here. It's hooking up. Okay. And let me turn on mirroring. Come on.
I pulled it up so I can, oh, got it.
Here it is. Great, thanks, Justin. So this is the plan you showed us last time, and you can see my pointer here. You had proposed putting in these zebra bumps on approaches to the and moving away from the crosswalks in order to protect the students and try and keep vehicles from using these areas as pickup and drop off or parking. So one of the comments we made was that this area here, this red zone on the north part of the intersection, gets used for pickup and drop off. And we suggested putting these zebra bumps here across, alongside the lane of travel and leaving a zone of no-go here to prevent drivers from trying to pull in and drop off. And I'm suggesting that also addresses a comment that was brought up this evening about U-turns of motorists coming on San Gabriel trying to swing around in the intersection. By really necking it down, you could prevent that as well.
So I think your question is, have we updated this plan with that? I'm not sure if we have or not. I know that the city has reviewed our plans. I don't believe we've made that type of change to the plans.
We just got a revised set of plans a couple of days ago. I don't recall whether this particular change was made, but it's an easy one for us to incorporate into our comments.
Great. Thank you.
But just to make sure I understand, the recommendation would be to add these zebra separators in the area between the two, just to discourage people from going and parking, dropping off there. And I didn't quite understand your comment here.
Well, it was something that was brought up this evening that the residents see people going northbound on San Gabriel and then attempting to make U-turns in the intersection and returning on San Gabriel.
So we can provide the direction. I understand exactly what the chair is talking about. And we'll provide that in writing along with our other comments on the plans. Perfect. We'll try to do that in the next day or two.
Great. So I don't need to worry about that. Thank you. So as I was saying before, I think we've talked about a lot of things that that could help make the situation better around the school, and I could just run through them really quickly. We've come up with a number of things that I think we'd like to see the school district come back with a more developed plan that covers how staff and students and families should hopefully behave around the schools, and some ways to encourage them to behave well and as good neighbors in this neighborhood. Some of the things we talked about were encouraging people to park at Masonic for dropping off instead of going on Brighton. We talked about Safer to Schools programs like bike trains and walking school buses. These are programs that are already going on in Albany and could be increased and perhaps incentivized or at least energized. When I was at Marin School as the Safer to School parent champion, I started a program for door opening. And that was a program where a parent would supervise students to stay on the curb, open doors in the white zone. Kids would come out of the cars. There would be a staff person located near the entryway to the school to help make sure that those students got on the campus. And that'll enable a lot of families with kids in the 2nd to 5th grade range to not have to park and take their kids in. And it actually made the experience much more smooth for them. And it encouraged people not to hang out in the white zone, which is often a problem. So we set up cones, we had vests, and we really made it a stop and go program.
The old patrols.
Sorry?
That's how old I am. I was a patrol.
You were a patrol, yeah,
Patrol with the-
So the difference being that under current law, it was much more appropriate to have the volunteer older students stay on the curb and not be in the street. And so we played it safe. And that actually worked really well. So students were, in essence, the students were asking the parents to behave well. And that actually worked pretty well. So I'd be happy to help you figure that one out. I think we would love to see encouragement and incentives for staff to carpool, to take transit, to ride bikes. I would like to see education in class for students about walking and being more aware in crosswalks. And Safe Routes to School, Alameda County has a program that is an educational piece that can be dropped in. So that can be done as a part of the classes. Having said all that, we haven't set any metrics for how much we'd like to see of that. One thing that we're hearing from the residents is that they're really strongly afraid of the impact overall of having another school start there. I understand you're probably trying to offset the start and end times of the schools, so that could help some. I think I'd be interested in seeing a written, fleshed out program of what the school district can implement and what the goals are for lessening the impact to the neighborhood.
So in terms of incentivizing staff and parents, I think if you're looking for metrics, I'll work with our principals at Ocean View as well. I can talk with all of our principals about, increasing the amount of education in terms of reminding parents, both at the middle school as well as Ocean View that's going to be over in the Annex, to say, please utilize Masonic. That is an area that you can drop off students. I don't think there's any incentive that I can give. I can't make them do that. And I think you know that, but we can certainly educate students. In terms of, walking students to school, and I know we have the walk and roll day, and I think our principals do a very good job of encouraging students to exercise, and one way of exercising is to, bike to school or walk to school. I think the only metrics you'll see is if you see more students, doing that. In terms of, we can encourage our staff to carpool or to bike to school, but I want people to be very mindful that elementary school teachers have a lot of stuff. If you've ever been in elementary, I was a high school teacher, but when I see our elementary school teachers, sometimes they're rolling suitcases because they're bringing manipulatives and creative materials for children, and so for them to bike might not work. I think we also need to be very mindful of not making an assumption that our teaching staff live close to Albany. Some do commute, and they need to drive. And I'm wanting to speak from personal experience. I live 30 miles away, and I'm an avid bike rider, and I absolutely would love to be able to BART and then ride my bike. But it is so prohibitive just in the BART system for me to do that. Our district office is in Berkeley. I am strongly considering parking my car at the district office in Berkeley, and every time I come to Albany, I just take my bike off my car and bike back and forth. If you've ever seen me on the street, you'll see that I have my backpack, my computer, and other things. So it does get a little bit prohibitive. So, and I'm only saying that by way of an example of our teachers carry a lot. They have a lot of teaching materials that they bring. So I just kind of want to be careful about that. I will definitely work with our staff and try to get more information out, that if at all possible, to find alternative ways to come to work. But I will tell you right now, our staff is trying to find just any place that they can park, and many of our staff are walking blocks to get to work. And I really like the idea about walking school buses, and I think that's something that our staff has been talking a little bit about. So I'll take a look a little bit more into that.
By the way, you don't incentivize parents. You incentivize kids, and they tell the parents what they want to do.
Thank you. Yes, I actually
Parents listen to the
I
kids
do
much
agree
more
with
than
that.
they
Yes,
listen to the staff.
I do agree with that.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just in meeting management,
Yes.
we have a couple other agenda items. We can work with the district and figure out a way to bring this kind of the behavioral and operational side of it back to the commission. The issue that's really before the commission this evening is to give us comments on the curb management, the painting of the curbs in white and red and so forth. And I think we have, I feel I have an understanding of the direction that you're giving us. If you wanted to make a motion with respect to that to clarify anything, or we could just take your discussion as is, and that we would incorporate that into comments back to the school district, written comments to the school district. We can provide that to the commission, and it's available, it's a public document, so that if there was any corrections or additions to that, you could provide that to us, and we can get them started on the implementation of that, so that it's ready when their campus is ready in a few months.
Thoughts, Commission?
Well, let me just try to articulate some of my thoughts about the white zones in particular, which I think I may have said less clearly than I should have. So I do think we need the white zones in the places where they were shown on the plan. I'm not sure about the length. I hope we can be flexible about finding the right length by observing behavior. I do think we should add white zones on Masonic in places where the parking is not in high demand, both at the very north end of Masonic and at the spot south of Garfield where the walkway is adjacent. I think we should fine-tune the hours of the white zones to maximize their usefulness and minimize their impact on the neighborhood. And maybe one change that might help some of the residents would be to start the white zone hours at 7:30 instead of 7 o'clock. If people are going to work, maybe they can park overnight and get their car moved out of the way before the school drop-off period begins.
Could we change that to a half an hour before school start time?
Okay, yeah, a half hour before. I don't feel that I'm necessarily making a motion.
I understand there may be
here,
some
but-
differences
Yeah.
coming in the school start time.
Okay, so a half hour before school start. And for the afternoon, I think we need a little bit wider range of hours for it to be useful, but maybe 1:30 to 4 or something like that. But again, I'd like to think of these white zone spaces as shared between use by the school during business hours and school hours and use by residents overnight. And I hope we can set up the hours so that the people who live there feel like they have full use of those spaces during the hours that they really need them, when people are home from work or haven't yet left for work. So I hope we can, in that way, kind of make the white zones fulfill their function with as minimal burden on the neighbors as possible. And I do want to emphasize again the need for on-site bike parking. As long as there's a dedicated group of students who go to school at the Annex and not at the main middle school, I'd like to insist that we have bike parking on the Annex. So those are my comments. I don't feel a need to make a motion about it, but if you'd like me to, I could.
This recommendation just goes straight to the school district, is that correct? And it doesn't go to council or any other?
That's correct.
Yes, I don't think there's a need for a motion, is there?
Right. Technically, this is an encroachment permit that we approve at the staff level, but we wanted your input this evening and public input. So we can go ahead with or without a motion. It's up to you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think as long as a white zone, at least one or two, is considered on Masonic. That's critical to me, looking at this, because I think it's a more holistic view of the problem that's in that area. Yep.
Okay. To be clear, I do want to see a lot of white zone on Masonic, and in particular, it could be better for traffic circulation if some of that white zone is south of Garfield, because that allows motorists to turn away from the intersections further to the north on Brighton.
I agree.
And reduce that congestion. And yeah, I haven't voiced it tonight, but I'm a little worried about moving the Brighton westbound drop-off zone a block east. I'm worried about traffic backing up through the intersection of Spokane and Brighton, and I'm not quite sure how to address that, but Spokane is a low-speed street that serves very well to get kids on their bikes to and from the middle school, and the four-way stop sign at Spokane and Brighton during drop-off time actually functions very well now, and I would hate to mess that up.
Maybe we need keep clear lettering, in there.
Signage is lovely. I'm not sure what effect that would have on the marauding parents. And I don't use that term lightly. These are people who are on a timeline and a schedule to get their kids to school so that they can get to work. And I don't take that lightly either for their seriousness or for the fact that they're not paying as much attention to the roadway as I would like them to. So I'm not sure what effect that would have. So we would love to see the results of the planning.
Great.
Any other comments from the commission? All right. We do have a question. Is this about process?
I do about process, yeah. Is there an
Would you come up to the microphone, please? Take your time. It's okay. We all need to breathe a little bit anyway.
Is there more opportunity for public input?
There is always opportunity for public input. In this case, you can write down your concerns and comments and send them probably to this commission and the Community Development Department, of which Jeff Bond is the director and Justin Freed is the traffic planner. We'll see those, as will we. We're asking to see the plan come back to the commission, and at that point, you would have a chance for comment again. And Jeff?
So I needed to clarify. I was intending to make the document public, but not to bring the comments back to the commission. You already have a very busy meeting scheduled for December. So I'm not proposing to bring this as an action item for your next meeting. We can make available to you and to the public the comments that we're providing to the school district, and anyone can comment on that if they wish to. But I was going to try to do this electronically rather than to take more time in your next meeting.
Okay, we have one last question. Yeah, please.
Most of my neighbors, it's getting late, and what I'm asking for myself and my family, that we've lived on that street 47 years, and for all my neighbors and friends, is that we as San Gabriel residents be notified about each and every step, because I'm sure the ones that can come, we want to be involved, and we are expecting to be included in every step of the way. Because our streets traffic is a nightmare right now. and what this school, and it's, I hear the name.
Ma'am, you've asked to be notified. Can we leave it at that for now?
Yes.
We do need to move on.
Will you keep us all through this entire process? Realize it's a process, but we want input, and I got my notice, it was there like at 5 o'clock yesterday. That's not enough notice. And also to the big apartment complex, they need to be notified.
So notification is important. Thank you for your comment.
Yes, thank you.
So Jeff, it sounds like the way you're describing this, we won't have a chance to see it again, and the public can make comments, but the process is kind of over.
That was our intention this evening, is to come to a decision about how to stripe the curbs for the encroachment permit. And then, of course, we do intend to monitor this. I think that the superintendent's suggestion of doing it annually is a good one. We could do it more frequently. And obviously, if there is a serious safety issue or a serious functional issue, we can bring that back to the commission. We will make sure that the members of the public get the postcard notices for any time the commission is discussing this. That's our intent. It's mailed first class. I'm sorry if people didn't get it, but it was mailed 10, 12 days before the meeting. And we will continue that practice for anything that the city is doing with respect to the school. Which I don't know that there's anything else the city's going to be doing with respect to the school facility. We control this public right-of-way and the curb and sidewalks and street trees, but that's about it.
Just to be clear, the encroachment permit is for the striping signage. What about the potential for raised crosswalks or a raised table at the intersection of Brighton and San Gabriel? So we agree that that's a good idea. Our understanding was that was a cost consideration for the school district, and that wasn't in their budget to implement. So if it is in the budget to implement, that's great. We would be happy to look at the details of that, and we could probably make it work. But that isn't what's been shown on the plans submitted to us. We hope what we have here, what we have here in terms of the striping and the crossings are much better than what exists today. What we have on the plans is much better than what exists today on the ground. But we continue to be concerned about the safety of students crossing at that intersection, and we'll be looking at that carefully as the schools start to operate. Okay. Are there current volume and speed surveys for the streets surrounding the school?
I don't know if I couldn't tell you offhand when the last time we did surveys in that area, but we have the capability of doing that anytime. I wouldn't suggest doing it right now because there's a lot of construction activity, which sometimes skews things.
Don't we have Brighton?
We're doing the speed thing on.
On Brighton.
North Albany.
Wasn't there some? Didn't we do?
Well,
some?
I think
Now you mentioned that. When we were looking at the El Cerrito Plaza, we did some surveys in that general area, so we can pull those up. That was 3 years ago, probably.
But I think we can guess the outcome of a speed survey, right? I mean, there's no movement of vehicles in that area during pickup and drop-off time.
But it's not just pickup and drop-off time. There are other movements, and we've heard that there's speeding and non-compliance with stop signs at other times.
Other times. Okay.
Apparently, I believe the construction is supposed to stop after January. So couldn't speed surveys be done this spring?
Yes, not a problem at all.
Then I would certainly request that.
Okay.
On Brighton, San Gabriel, Masonic, and Spokane. I'm sorry, that's 4, I know. To give us a baseline?
Yeah.
Yes, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Yep.
So do we have resolution then on what the design that's going to be submitted for permit for Brighton and San Gabriel will be? I feel like that's still open-ended for us, at least at the commission. We've made some recommendations. Sounds like the raised crosswalk or raised intersection is cost prohibitive, but I think there's other things we wanted there, right, to ensure that cars weren't parked in the intersection and students had the safest and shortest crossing distances possible.
Right, and you at previous meetings you talked about that. With each iteration of plans that we receive, we go back and make sure that those comments are incorporated into the plans, as well as making sure that it meets the technical requirements.
How would residents ensure that they receive a copy of the recommendations that are forwarded to the school district?
We will create we'll put it on our webpage, and we'll set up in a way so they can do a search and like a keyword search for San Gabriel campus or Albany Middle School, and make sure that this pops up on the top of that search.
How will they know when to do that search? How could you inform them?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think they'll need to be proactive about that. If they want to reach out to us and say, here's my email or here's my phone number, we'll contact you.
Could they, for example, leave a list tonight of the people who are here's email?
We have, for many people, we have names and email addresses, so we can use the list that we have.
So you'll take from the comment cards and
we'll do our best.
Correspondence that's been
if
received.
the ones that we have that we can read the handwriting, we'll do our best.
Okay, and if somebody wanted to be included, they could send you that request?
Yes.
Okay. I think we've gone about as far as we can go. Thanks you everyone for attending for this, and for those of you hanging in for the next item, we'd like to move on to that. I do need a resolution about the ending of the meeting. Could somebody give me an extension resolution?
For how long?
At least a half an hour.
I propose to extend the meeting time to 10:30
Second.
tonight.
And it's seconded by Robert.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So we do need to continue on with the meeting. And if you can use one of the pieces of paper in the back of the room to write your email address down on, and leave that with staff. So let's move on to the next item, which is item number 5.3, the enroachment permit for a bus stop parklet at 1116 Solano Avenue, adjacent to Mr. Dewey's.
Good evening. We're going to switch. Good evening. Before you tonight is an encroachment permit request for a proposed parklet on Lower Solano in front of Mr. Dewey's Cashew Creamery. To give you, to refresh your memory, since you saw an initial request in this winter, AC Transit had filed encroachment permit applications for bus stop relocation. Those requests were approved by the City Council on April 16th of this year. And what that does is it relocates the bus stops for the 72. So the northbound 72 stop will be relocated to the north side of San Pablo and Solano. And the 18 route would be directed to a new stop in front of Mr. Dewey's on Lower Solano, so 1116 Solano Avenue, which is right at Canes. These curb assignments, or reassignments, if you will, are anticipated to move forward in 2019. We've been coordinating with AC Transit. They have some scheduling considerations that they take into account before actually, we work together to make the curb changes. To give you some context, this is the bus stop location. It is located in front of Mr. Dewey's. There was a juice shop. It's now going to be a coffee shop, and then a salon, Farmers Insurance. And then this is where the red curb will be proposed. And to be clear, whether or not this parklet proceeds, there is a red curb going into that space. This is really more a request to take advantage of the potential for creation of a new parklet. So even if this encroachment permit were not to proceed, there's still going to be a red curb and a loss of on-street parking, and that was an outcome of that council action in April. So the applicant with that is proposing a bus stop parklet in that public right-of-way where the red curb is going to be implemented. He's been working with a licensed landscape architect, design builder, who has built parklets for other jurisdictions within the region, so he has experience doing this type of construction. He had also worked on the parklet guidelines for the city of Berkeley, so he knows quite a lot about constructing and designing. We've included, or I should backtrack, the AC Transit has design guidelines that were taken into consideration for the preliminary design before you tonight. And so this is the proposed parklet. You'll see, kind of similar to Hal's, that there is a portion of the parklet that faces out to the street. This is basically the bus stop seating area where the sailcloths are proposed. And then the other portion of it would provide outdoor seating for patrons of businesses, members of the community to enjoy their ice cream, coffee, tacos, or just sit outside and enjoy the corridor. So that's, that would occupy that full space. And this is another view from of it from the sidewalk, looking north. And this is another snapshot of it. Again, the bus stop portion is covered in the sailcloth, and then there's the seating adjacent to it. Just in general, encroachment permits are regulated in Section 1412 of the Albany Municipal Code. Substantive permanent encroachments into the public right-of-way go to the City Council for ultimate review and action. And with that, we are recommending that you forward a recommendation to the council to approve the encroachment permit application. And the project designer is here this evening, should you have questions about the scope.
Is the encroachment permit only going to go through Traffic and Safety Commission, or are other commissions going to?
It will ultimately go to City Council.
City Council, okay. Will it go through Parks and Rec, or anyone else for?
No, it won't.
Just through Traffic Safety? And
just through Traffic and Safety. And one thing, just to clarify, unlike the Hal's parklet, this is going to be privately financed, which is a bit of a difference. When the Hal's parklet went forward, there was city monies that went to that construction, and that's why it went through a slightly different process.
Mm-hmm. So if it's privately constructed, does that mean that the parklet itself will get transferred over to the city, and then there's an operation and maintenance agreement, or does it stay with ownership with the? Yeah,
we would work on an O&M agreement with the business owner.
But this will be a city parklet, correct?
Well, it'll be privately financed. It'll be publicly accessible.
So who owns liability and who owns it?
I'm going to defer to Jeff on this because he worked on the Hal's parklet.
With any encroachment permit, we have a hold harmless and indemnity provision for any sort of work, permanent or temporary, in the public right-of-way. And that same provision is basically the applicant is ultimately responsible.
Okay. Thanks.
So what happens if the business changes hands?
If the business wanted to take the parklet out, that would be their prerogative, and it would go back to being a regular bus stop. I would hope that we could have an opportunity to work through that and make some sort of arrangement. If the parklet itself is working well and there's a change in businesses, that maybe we can figure out a way to make it stay.
So if that broke down and the new owner just didn't want to do anything, didn't want to maintain it, didn't want to pay to remove the material from there, then what would happen?
I mean, the worst case scenario is the city would have to remove. If the city didn't want to maintain it, we would remove it.
Okay. So does the public have a chance to comment on the design details? I don't know if tonight is the right place for that, but will
We
there
did
be
send
an
a public
opportunity?
notice out.
Yeah, we did send a public notice out, but strictly speaking, we're not here to regulate the aesthetics. We're here to regulate the use of the public right-of-way.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm just wondering, is there going to be a commission or council meeting at which people can offer their public comment about the specifics of the design?
We were hoping that that would happen this evening.
So if there are issues about the design, we should cover them tonight?
Yes.
Okay.
But the design is in keeping with guidelines from AC Transit.
That's correct.
Okay.
And we also had, I believe, 2 meetings with AC Transit in the field where we walked the premises together.
Okay.
In our last meeting on this topic, we talked a lot about positioning and width of the parklet in order to affect the position of the bus stopped in the street. With this particular parklet design, how much space is there left once a bus is at it, between the bus and the double yellow line? In other words,
Yeah.
will it be possible for vehicles to pass the bus
No.
when it's at the stop?
No, it's an in-lane stop.
Completely in lane or mostly in lane?
Yeah.
I believe it's completely.
Well, I think the question, which is the same question I was going to, or comment on, is ideally, we don't want to leave any space on the left side of the bus when it's stopped. So the bus mirror to mirror is 10.5 feet wide. So the lane should be 11, 10.5 even, but 11 would be the preferred width between the parklet and the double yellow line. So I think if that happens, then cars will be deterred from going into the opposite lane of traffic to pass.
And for HALs, we use the.
Yeah.
the-
And they're
Yeah.
in the wrong location, right? So
They're not really
right,
working, but.
they're right next to the bus as opposed to.
As a matter of fact, I think they're removed.
Are they gone now? I haven't looked.
They were removed with for dinner with Albany, and I'm not sure they were replaced. They were not. An audience member says they were not.
So we digress, but we have a chance to put those in the right
If they had
location.
been in the right place, would they be effective?
Yeah, I think so. So there's cars queuing behind a 40-foot bus. So you want to have the delineators behind the bus.
So are we proposing that kind of flexible post in this design?
You certainly have the discretion to.
It's not in the proposal yet, but we could add it tonight. Is that right?
I think in that area, we should talk about that.
Okay.
Posts. Let's table that for now and keep that in the discussion.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Can the designer talk about where the bus pole will be and what that will look like? That's always the last final detail, which becomes a point of contention.
Thanks for sticking with us tonight.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Ian Moore. I will say that this is a conceptual level design, and the bus pole has in fact not yet been addressed, but looking forward to that level of design, it should sit roughly at that point. This is front door, boarding, lighting zone, so it would need, ideally work into that space right there. And further details are forthcoming, but as far as positioning, that's my thought. Any other clarification you'd like at this point? No?
Well, I have a question.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Which involves the parklet, but so at this corner, and I'm looking on Street View, there's actually currently a bike rack located between on the curve of the bulb out. it's not in this illustration. What is illustrated are the two tables that are currently exist, I think.
Yep.
And I've heard some feedback from community members and experienced myself that it's actually it's a little tough to get between the crosswalks because the tables are directly in the way.
Yeah, I've experienced that as well. To date, we've not discussed any adjustments to those existing tables, but that could be considered as well. And while that bike rack is not shown, my assumption is that would stay, the existing one, as well as we would add some additional bike parking. It's not quite visible from this angle, but it's in fact, nor that one.
Oh, there we go, right.
It is, however, visible here. So it's additional, so 3 hoop racks, 6 bikes.
Okay.
And that's achieved by relocating
the compost, recycling, and waste bin.
The big bellies would be relocated.
Right. If I parked a cargo bike at those bike racks, would somebody be able to get between the table and the bike to the crosswalk?
That's a good question. I should take a closer look at that. Yeah.
So it looks like 3 racks for a total of 6 spaces?
Correct.
And are those spaces visible from the seating area at the other end of the parklet?
With those planters planted at that sight line would be cut off. Yeah, not visible. Yeah.
I'll get back to you. We're still in the question phase.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good.
Other questions from the commission? Seeing none, we're going to open up to public comment. If you'd sit down for a second, we'll free up the microphone.
Is that going to get reset to 3?
Sure.
Thank you. I may not need 3, but just in case. I had a few comments about this. One is I'm concerned about the fact that the bus, like the parklet on the other side, that the bus will be stopping and all the traffic that's coming around the corner from San Pablo and turning right on Solano is going to be almost immediately stopped. So one idea I had was that before you actually approve this, would be you practice by putting like cones or something in the street every 15 minutes for several hours for different days of the week to see how how people respond, because I think people are going to be irritated because they'll be coming around the corner. And then one possibility is once they figure out that the bus is going to stop every 15 minutes, they will then go down and turn right on Washington, which is the street. I live off of Washington on Stanage, where there are many stop signs that no one stops at. And I have many recordings that I could show you. They don't even pause anymore. So what will happen is they'll go down to Washington and then just speed up Washington, running all through. This is the cars. Of course, the bicycles will do the same, but I'm talking about the cars right now. So that's one of my concerns. I feel like, why not test it out? Why not approve it right away? There's no hurry. So just find out how the traffic is going to respond. And I think that there's even a chance that they will go around even though they're not supposed to. Which will make it more dangerous here. And then I just had a question. I didn't even think of it till you were describing this. So the door, the place you pointed to where the bus is going to let off is like on the other side of those sails, is like. So if somebody were using a wheelchair, using a wheelchair, walker, or a stroller, and there are a bunch of people sitting there, would they be able to get off of the bus and roll through, or are there going to be a lot of, have you taken into account accessibility so they could roll through, stroll through? And then what about people who want to put a bicycle in front of the bus? So how are they, this just seems awkward to me. So they go to the front of the bus, which is now kind of pinned in by a bunch of things, and get their bicycle, and then they're in the street, or I'm just logistically, I'm not clear on that. So I'm opposed to this. I think, I like it when buses pull off the street and let cars go by. I think it's a really good idea, especially on Solano. So anyway, those are my comments. Thank you.
Hi, Amy Smallins, Albany Strollers and Rollers. So sorry, I was dying, I had to go to the bathroom. So I missed, you said you're keeping the bike rack on that, okay. Have you been to the parklet at Hal's office? So they put bike racks on the other side of on the opposite side, and no one ever uses them, because if you're sitting at a table here, you're never gonna put your bike all the way on the other side where you can't see it. And so people end up putting their bikes here and on the sidewalk and everything like that. And that's just reality, especially if you're on a road bike. You know, you'd rather, like at Pete's at the top of the hill, the top of Solano, there's the Pete's, and then right next to there's the nice corral with the 4 racks. And even if you have your bike and you just lock it with your helmet, people are going to use that. It feels secure because you can see it. So I just don't think, I think the same thing's going to happen. And I think you need to figure out, especially with the sales and stuff, some way to put racks more, whether it's in between here or something of that sort. And Albany Strollers and Rollers, again, will help fund them if you need. You know, we're here to help do that. But I think that's the only way people are going to use them. People are going to use those for the tables, just like they're going to use the bike rack for the tables, just like they do. I live a block away. I think this would be another cool place to gather. I definitely understand Julie's concerns, and a test makes sense, but if it does work, I think that the bike racks right there aren't practical. Thank you.
Just a couple of questions. Where the bus pulls in, it'll be, the stop will be long enough to accommodate the whole bus? Middle door, back doors, 3 doors, sort of like the other one, and the bicycle rack. And I was just curious, I know it mentions Mr. Dewey's Cashew Creamery. Do the other businesses that'll be losing parking places, are they involved in this? Do they agree to it and so on?
They signed a petition in support of the request.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no one else, I'll bring it back to the commission.
And I think we should just clarify that the decision we make tonight has no impact on parking. Whether we approve or deny this encroachment permit, the number of parking spaces lost is going to be the same, right?
It was already
That's correct.
decided. Yes.
What kind of data or what level of confidence do we have from whatever data that's been gathered about the potential for backup behind a stop bus and blocking San Pablo?
I don't think we have any hard and fast data, but I know in some more informal conversations we've had with AC Transit, when they do an in-lane stop, I believe the stop and start actually goes a lot faster than if they have to pull into the curb area, and then they have to pull back out.
Right, so that's the preference, is stopping in the lane of traffic so that you don't have to. A lot of times what bus operators do is if they pull out of traffic, they'd like to keep the tail of the bus back in traffic so that they have an easy time getting back in. So this allows for a really a quicker boarding and alighting. Plus, it's a lot easier to get flush with the curb. So if you're in a wheelchair or can't step across the curb to get into the bus, this is the simplest way to do that.
And the design is meant to be more of a platform, is that correct? Correct. I mean, that's what it is okay. So it's an easier on and egress off the bus.
I do understand the advantages. I've been challenged by community members who think that traffic is going to back up onto San Pablo. So we don't have any study of that.
No, we don't have any data on that. I mean, I don't mind saying this anecdotally because I take that route when I go home. I get stopped when people decide that they want to wait for a parking space that someone is vacating, and that itself causes backups into San Pablo. So, there's been conflict, under current conditions. So with this, where we know it's a more abbreviated start and stop, I mean, it may be the same, it may be minimized.
It'll be 15 seconds on average, usually, is our bus stop. So it's a pretty short period of time.
How long is the left turn signal from southbound San Pablo to eastbound Solano?
Do you know the signal? I don't know the signal timing.
If it happens to be the same 15-second interval that the bus is stopped there, then nobody gets through. Is that?
Well, not nobody. The initial, you know, if
Queue
the
of
bus
the
is coming
street.
northbound and turns right, there might be cars behind it. We could end up with people not getting through the signal. I guess that's not the worst thing in the world. The worst thing is, the problem is if they enter the intersection and can't leave it.
Yeah. This does seem like a much riskier place for a parklet in terms of traffic flow than Hal's, where if Hal's was going to create some congestion and some queuing on Solano Avenue, it doesn't have this domino effect on major corridors. It's a minor inconvenience for a minute or so, and then people get moving again. Here, it seems like
We discussed this pretty thoroughly. When
Yeah,
we
and
made
actually,
the original. I mean, we did. I mean, we don't know, right? But we discussed the timing, and we
yeah,
discussed.
not to put you on the spot, Commissioner Del Rosario, but I am going to do this. What is the frequency of the 18 route?
It's every 15 minutes, so you're going to have
That's what I
4
thought. So
times
it's
an
4
hour.
times an hour that
4
you
times
would
an hour
have
that there's
this
going to be a
potential issue.
15-second.
Isn't there a G bus in the evening? Returning up Solano?
Yes, and alightings are much quicker than boardings.
They're what?
They're getting off the bus is much faster than getting on the bus.
and nobody's going to be getting on the G.
No, we don't allow it anymore.
Yeah. You can't do local.
Yeah, no more
Right.
local.
You have to go Transbay. Okay. So it's 4 times an hour plus the G dropping off.
Yeah, so G is every 30 minutes, I believe, in the PM.
But shorter than 15 seconds is.
Yeah. It's
Well, I thought we had raised the concern last time it came to us, and I was hoping to see more data. Any other comments?
Well, just following up on that, what is the relative timing of moving the bus stop and building the parklet? Are they happening?
So there's a two-phase approach. The red curb is going to occur in the beginning of the year, and then the parklet would proceed sometime after that once the funding is completed and the applicant goes through the building permit process.
Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering about this idea of a demo or pilot. Once I'm not sure it's practical to just put cones in the road randomly. I think that'll confuse people. But once the bus is using the new stop, would it be possible to have the bus do some trials where it actually stops in lane even before the parklet is built, just to see what the effect is?
can't
I believe-
unload in the street.
It won't be the same, right? The whole idea of a parklet and the way it's built is that it helps you on board and off.
Right. So it wouldn't work.
Yeah,
It wouldn't work for the bus passengers.
Yeah, wouldn't work for
No, you
passengers.
can't try that without having some kind of platform.
You would need to build the platform.
Need
Yeah.
to build sort of a temporary
Or
parklet.
Temporary versions of it, but it would be most of what they're proposing already.
Yeah.
I guess another way to look at this is I mean, there is a potential. I don't know how big that queue would be, right? I'm not familiar enough. But a way to look at this at the trade-off is the vehicle is inconvenienced by the delay created by the bus compared to the number of passengers who are actually carried on the bus up Solano.
Yeah, and again, I'm not so worried about the vehicles that are stuck behind the bus because they'll get to keep moving in a few seconds. It's more the ripple effect that I think is worrisome if it starts affecting traffic on San Pablo.
But there's a ripple effect now.
Right.
That's significant, right? I mean,
Well,
I
that's
think
why we
that's
moved
some
the
of
bus
what
stop
we
in the
were
first place.
evaluating. The ripple effect
Right.
onto San Pablo is significant.
Right, that's why we moved the bus stop in the first place.
Right.
There is a significant ripple effect on San Pablo. I don't want to downplay that.
Right.
But it's cars mostly going in the same direction. We're talking about cars that would be possibly stuck in the intersection going perpendicular to traffic, which to me is a lot more stressful.
So if you pulled the bus out of traffic at this location, then you have the volume of cars that the bus has to deal with to pull back into traffic. And so your delay for the bus is then increased.
Certainly.
Yeah.
So it's all trade-off.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, that's kind of the issue that we face with the existing conditions of the bus stop on the south side of San Pablo.
Yeah, I think that's what Susan's saying is, that's the issue, right, that we were trying to fix on a different street, but yes, the issue.
But that's, to illustrate the point, that's why that queue backs up from the intersection of Solano and San Pablo, typically down to here.
And that queue affects riders and cars and the people on the bus and the pedestrians crossing the
And
street.
multiple bus lines.
And multiple bus lines. So this moved some of the bus lines. So it's more of a portion of that problem, possibly, but even more expedited with a parklet that kind of allows for the faster on and off.
Yeah.
So if I can try to summarize the commission's view, there is a risk of some queuing and some ripple effect on traffic by building this parklet, but we think that it's a net benefit to traffic overall.
That would be my.
Well, and those spaces that are no longer parking spaces, to your point earlier, I mean, the amount of people going in and out of those spots, that backs you up now. I mean, that happens, that exists at this point. So you take those out of the mix, then the bus just takes the place of several parking, in and out. I mean, it might be a wash, I don't know, or at least close to it. So.
I want to respond to Robert. I disagree with something you said. It's not moving the problem. I still see a possible effect on San Pablo, which is the problem that we're trying to solve.
Right. It would be
Maybe
shifted
it's
to
a lesser problem.
Yeah, it would be a lesser problem in the opposite direction.
I'm
right?
hoping it will
Something
be.
like that.
Meaning they get backed up into the intersection and hold up traffic.
Right.
I guess we can do a little bit more math on this and see how long of a queue you have from the back of the bus out to San Pablo and how many vehicles can be, what's the capacity of that length of roadway and how many vehicles can queue up behind a bus for 15 seconds. If that's, I don't know what it is off the top of my head. Is it 5? Is it 8? It's probably somewhere around there, I guess.
And then how big is the
Well, so I forget what the phasing of the light is. But so let's say an 18 bus comes north, turns right on Solano, stops. There are a few cars behind it. They fill up part of the space. Now the light changes and the southbound cars come turning left onto Solano. Let's say the drivers aren't very attentive. Maybe one of the cars gets stuck in an intersection. The phase changes again, and the eastbound traffic proceeds, and 2 out of however many there are think they can make it.
Right.
And for whatever reason, the bus is still there. Maybe there's a handicapped patron.
Right. Wheelchair passenger is possible, sure.
So it's a judgment call as to whether that's going to happen frequently or infrequently.
Right, I guess that's the
Because we
question,
don't have
right?
any data.
How frequently would that happen that it would create a negative impact on San Pablo?
I just want to add one quick commentary to that. That is a split phase intersection. So when you're in the southbound direction, you get a green, you get the left turn pocket. That eventually goes to red. Then you have green going both north and south. Then the northbound cycle gets the arrow in the, once it goes red on the north side. And then at that point, you have the split phase where you have the eastbound direction then going west. So you do have a little bit of timing there that actually works in the favor where it would potentially minimize backup.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I think we need to just try it. I don't think we have enough data to prove that it's never going to cause a serious problem, but
Yeah.
I don't think we're in a position to prove that using traffic models, so.
Not as a commission, no. So are you proposing a test or what?
No, I don't really see that a test is feasible. I wish we could do a test, but I don't see how we could. Because I think the proposals for how to do a test have been shown to be impractical.
Yeah, I don't know how to do that.
No, it would be it would be bad. It wouldn't be beneficial. It'd cause more problems.
So just to be clear, the timeline on this is the curb gets red zoned, the parklet gets built, and the 18 would then change its route and start stopping there.
No, I think the 18 is going to change once that curb goes red, because that is going to be done in conjunction with the 72 relocation.
I guess one thing we should think about is
You can think about the construction timing.
right? So you're going to have to move somewhere during construction, so the bus will need to stop probably back at the old stop. So I don't know if we want to make that move until construction is done.
And from what I understand, and Ian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the construction,
Fast,
it's
right?
a fairly straightforward build out, because you're building a platform as kind of the initial construction, and then the rest of it, the seating, the built-in planters, the more the cosmetic treatments, that tends to go pretty quickly.
A few weeks, I'm thinking. Yeah. One way to look at the bus stop is maybe at a policy level, do you want to give priority to transit at the expense of some delay to vehicles?
The amount of which.
We need to attend to our time.
Yeah, I'm looking at them. Do you want to propose another 15
I propose we extend but till 10:45.
Yeah.
Can I get a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
With apologies to staff. So I do want to prioritize bus transport. So for that reason, I think I'm mollified and I'm ready to move forward.
What we haven't said anything about in the design and the location of this, what this adds to Albany, in my opinion, is this is the core. To me, this is such the core of Albany. You know, I mean, that intersection, that's the start of Solano. It's, you know, it feels like downtown to me, and to add a feature like this in that area was definite, but right before we do, you know, the streets and all the Solano
Complete
streets, whatever. What is that?
Oh,
you guys talked about it last meeting.
Complete streets.
Complete streets. Thank you. I mean, this is just the kickoff for that area, and I think that what this will add to that part of our town is amazing. You know, I thought that when we first started to discuss this, and then as a bus rider, I think, you know, it's a nice welcome, and I actually think it will move probably faster when it's all said and done.
Should.
That's my opinion on them. And the design it's fine. I mean, like, it's fun. It would be a fun place to be, just like we've experienced at Hal's, I think.
So my one thought about the design, I think this came up when we were thinking about the Hal's design, which had a similar sort of S-shaped two-part structure, was to try not to create too much separation between the bus area and the sitting at tables area. Just in a cultural sense, I think we want to foster the idea that the people riding the bus are essentially the same group of neighbors as the people sitting at the tables and eating at the cafe, and not create some kind of unintentional socioeconomic or cultural distinction between them. And I don't know how high that railing is proposed between them, but I looked at Hal's and it looked to me like it's a slope that's about maybe 3 feet at one end and 18 inches at the other end, which I think is a compromise. It's maybe a little more separation than I would have liked, but it gives a little bit of a feeling of community.
But you also need to make sure that the design is something where you can go on and off the bus easily and not necessarily interrupt the people that are there for the longer term, like.
Right, not have the people sitting in your way.
Right, you want to be able to get off or queue up also. I mean, I don't know how much queuing there is on the buses that go up.
So that's one thing to keep in mind, and I don't know how the design would be impacted by this, but the ridership is much higher here than it would be at Hal's. I think Hal's has like 25 people or something like that, mainly getting off, I believe it is. Here it's like 100, 125, I believe, or something like that. And that's
daily?
Yeah. So, over four passengers per trip maybe could be waiting there at a time. And of course, it's going to be higher in the peaks. It could be 8 people waiting there. So it's going to get a lot more volume. So that may impact your design decisions on this. The bench seating will get used more than at Hal's. Hal's is, again, a drop-off, so people don't get off the bus and sit down. But here they'll be sitting down and waiting to get on. There was a comment, I think, from the public, and maybe she left already, about getting your bike onto the bike rack on the bus. So one thing that's nice about Hal's Parklet is that the walls by the front of the parklet flare out. So I think you can get your bike on the bus, get back on the curb, and then get into the door. What we wouldn't want is a situation where you have to get around that seating to the almost to the corner to put your bike on the bus and then come back around and then get on the bus. So that should be a more closer motion between the two. One other thing with over 100 passengers, so that's a pretty well used stop. I mean, it's not, we have bus stops, just to put things in perspective, there are bus stops where 500 people get on. So, it's not that. But it is a good opportunity to think about schedule information for the passengers, any type of wayfinding information, just stuff that will attract people to take the bus in this situation.
Yeah, and actually just one corollary, because this, from what I understand, working with other staff at AC Transit, the lesson learned on the Hal's office is to plan for where the bus stop sign goes.
Yes. So the pole, I think, at Hal's, I think you had to start thinking about how are you going to punch this pole through what Hal just built, or what the owners just built there. So we don't want that situation, and I think there's either a way to accommodate for that, and using the standard breakaway street sign poles that AC Transit uses, or is there some way that we can incorporate a pole that could potentially get hit, so you don't want something that would be damaged and not replaced, and then also hang the flag on. There are bus poles out there that are on electrolyers on street lights, so it's not unprecedented to not always use a pole, but the pole is the marker for anyone with a visual disability, or also for the bus driver to say, okay, I need to stop at this point.
And you also put notices on it from time to time.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Was that it?
Yeah, that's right.
So, just quickly, already talked about the tables at the corner. The bike racks are separated visually from the entire rest of the parklet. We'd love to see a change in that, and there's a space issue. You've indicated all the shade is over only the people waiting for the bus and not the people at the seats, which might drive people into the waiting for the bus area. I have no strong opinions about the design. It looks fun and enjoyable. I am a little disappointed that there's a lamp post in the opening for the access to the bus waiting area.
Is that what that is?
It seems like that could be managed a little better.
Those are existing?
Of course.
Yeah.
I understand, but perhaps you could manipulate your opening.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Okay. And we need to have a resolution to ask the city council to authorize staff to issue an encroachment permit. And since I'm reading it, why don't I make the motion? I move that we recommend to the city council to authorize staff to issue an encroachment permit to allow the construction of the bus stop parklet. Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Now, we have less than 10 minutes left in the time that we've allocated, and we have the next item is recommending grants, or recommending the pursuit of grants. So my question to staff is, Is this an appropriate amount of time to deal with this, and when is the deadline for this information?
The grant is due November 30th, so we should at least discuss that item.
Okay, so let's move on. Thank you, Ann.
Can we stipulate that we've read the materials and just move to public comment and possible approval without discussion? Without a staff presentation?
I'm okay with that. Everybody else?
Yep.
I heard yes from everybody. Is there anybody who wishes to comment on this item? Hearing none, I bring it back to the commission for comments and opinion. Susan, do you want to start? Is that a no?
Yeah, I'm in.
Do we have a motion?
I'm in favor, so.
Does staff need feedback on what the application subject will be? It sounded like that there was a list of choices.
We had a list of a lot of different ideas. We like to have a little bit of flexibility because we like to shop the ideas by the people at Caltrans. And we haven't had a lot of time to work on it, or any time really to work on it ourselves to fine tune those. So if there's something that jumps out at you that you really like or you really don't like, or something that's not on this list, we'd love to hear it. But otherwise, we'll just kind of continue to brainstorm ourselves, talk to Caltrans. Council members may give us some direction.
So if we simply move to approve the staff recommendation, that satisfies your needs?
That's right. I think the council would like to know that you had a chance to comment on it if you wanted to.
Well, I move to approve the staff's recommendation.
Second, or discussion?
I'd like to throw our hat in for, I like the Vision Zero policy. I'm putting some effort behind that. I think it's a good one for.
The which one?
I think there's letter C, creation of a traffic safety Vision Zero policy and related activities. If we were going to emphasize one, I think that's one that's appropriate for our city and things that we work on at staff and commission level.
I'm particularly interested in item E because it's something we run up against all the time, lack of alternatives and difficulty with our process. I'm not sure, is that mostly aimed at refining our process or coming up with new tools? The update to traffic calming tools and roadway safety plans? Both? Refining?
I'm sorry, I was.
Oh,
It should be in the binder. Or
Here, you can look on this if you want.
There's a staff report.
You can look on
Just
here.
got it here.
But as long as we're saying that, I kind of think after today and of other comments, the school zone. So, I mean, like, if you want a little bit of focus, that would be an interest of mine.
I want to make sure to answer your question, Mr. Chair, but I didn't quite understand it.
Right, start again. Item number E, is it mostly about refining our current process or coming up with new tools in the toolbox to use for traffic calming?
I think it's more in my mind, it was more of the latter, but it could be both if you thought we needed to.
I'm very into the latter.
Yeah, I think we all feel like we're not able to respond to people's concerns as well as we wish we could.
So we've all talked about different things.
Well, at least it's a subset of all of them,
Yeah.
right? There's
All kinda
J.
related.
It goes to J.
Yes.
We've said 3. And
I think it's hard to pick.
I know. And
so-
there's probably more.
So I think that means that they're on the right track.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's right. Agree.
We have seen and responded with feedback.
Yes.
And we should move along. So.
Was there a second to? the
I'm
motion?
sorry. So we had a motion, right? And did we have a second?
I think you seconded already, or you said discussion. You said both.
I said, can I get a second or discussion?
Oh, did you? Okay. You
That's what I meant. I'm sorry if that was unclear.
I'll second it.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
3 minutes.
We have 3 minutes. We have item 5.5, which basically was a staff report that told us what they were going to do. Unless we want to get into a shouting match, maybe we'll just skip that one. And then maybe we should move on to announcements.
Well, I would like to just give you a quick update on the back end angle parking. We are expecting to go to City Council. We realize this is something that people would like attention given to. It's our intention to address back-end parking and keep the options open. It always has been our intention to address back-end parking and keep our options open in the report that is being prepared now. We like the idea of doing a demonstration project, and what we're trying to do is collect the information that would be to be able to give to council what would be involved in a demonstration project. And in our view, it's easier to do a demonstration project separate from the existing contract and the existing grant that we have with Caltrans, rather than to go through an amendment process of both those things. And we could use the same design team if we wanted to, or we could go out and bring somebody else in. That's perhaps.
So are we here tonight to talk about when and where the demonstration project might be, or simply to approve the idea?
This was simply to give you some information, and because it's something that's we're hearing back from people about a real interest in seeing this incorporated into the Solano Avenue Complete Streets report. And so that's why it's on your agenda tonight. And the main point being, we understand the advantages of back-angle parking, and we're just trying to address that, figure out a way to deliver the demonstration project in a way that's efficient. And it will be a good demonstration project.
So would the demonstration project fit in before we get to final design of the Complete Streets project, or would that just have to be a separate effort?
So we're in the conceptual planning phase. We don't have any money for design. It'll probably be like San Pablo, probably be a couple of years before we get grant money, or we save our own money to do design, a couple more years before we build. So the idea would be as soon as we can pull it together, but probably sometime in 2019 to do the demonstration project and use that as a basis for moving forward into a design.
And did you say that language would be left open in the Complete Streets project so that this could be incorporated later?
It could be incorporated both they have language to encourage the future decision-making process to consider that, and also whatever is designed to allow it to flip back and forth, because some cities implement these things and a few years later they decide they don't like it. Or maybe right now people are a little nervous about it. I think in 5 years this is not going to be a big deal. It'll be probably easier in a few years, and maybe we let it become more kind of culturally accepted. I don't know. And then it's easier it's just a paint striping exercise.
Great. So I'm satisfied if the wording in the Complete Streets project report includes the possibility and that sort of thing.
Should we state that the commission recommends to the council to approve the demonstration?
Well, are you taking a plan to them? Are you taking a specific plan, or just an intent to do a demonstration and an idea of the scope?
I'm not sure.
Right.
We're asking our consultants to get back with us with an idea of what would be involved in doing a demonstration, and what our menu of choices are in doing a demonstration.
All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to move that we recommend that the City Council endorse the plan of doing a demonstration of back-in-angle parking and charge the Traffic and Safety Commission to oversee the details.
Good. I'll second.
I have a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh.
Right, so we're over time. So the question is, do we want to allocate more time to the announcements or continue them to the next meeting? And staff, I know you guys have been here a couple nights this week, including this, and so would you be able to continue for a few minutes, or should we stop here?
I can if you guys would like to continue.
Did you check with Jeff first? Okay, great. So can I get a motion to continue the meeting?
For how long?
11?
I move we continue till 11 o'clock.
Okay.
We end sooner, we end sooner.
I get a second?
Second.
Got a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
It might happen.
I will be quick. So
I'm sorry, I didn't ask you.
there were several announcements. Most of these are just updates because they're items you have discussed and followed previously. For 6-1, Caltrans completed their crosswalk installations. I was going to correct, we may have named the wrong on Castro versus Clay in our previous recitation of the unsignalized intersections, but crosswalks were completed at Garfield, Castro, Portland, and the eastbound Washington across San Pablo Avenue. So they finished their project installing the enhanced crosswalks, the signage, and the yield bars. 6-2, San Pablo, or do you want me to stop for any questions in between, or should I just run through these?
I think we'll stop you if we need it.
Okay. 6-2, staff and consultants yesterday presented the concept that was discussed at last Traffic and Safety to Caltrans, and we received a positive reception. We're awaiting follow-up from Signal Operations, but we're expecting to proceed with the concept we discussed last month. 6-3, Masonic signage. We have received the signage that was discussed several months ago, so I'm working to identify the exact locations where each of those signs will be posted, and we'll give the work order to Public Works shortly to put up. 6-4, Keynes Adams pilot. We have received plans from our consultants for the pilot, and we expect to bring them next month. 6-5, Complete Streets was presented to Planning and Zoning last night, and we'll be going through all the feedback we've received over this month and beginning to write down the draft document. 6-6, Albany is part of a joint powers authority for the provision of transit shelters funded through advertising on the shelters. AC Transit is preparing an RFP for a new contract and soliciting input from the various jurisdictions. I'll say at this point, since it's changed over the month, the types of things they're soliciting feedback on, but if commissioners or members of the public have questions or comments on the shelter program, they can reach out to me directly. That's probably the best way to go at this point. The one other item that wasn't on there that I received notice from Parks and Rec, the item that was discussed a while ago before Traffic and Safety art project, the Hidden Creeks artwork that will be along the Greenway, highlighting the creeks that go under the Greenway, is moving forward. They plan to take that to council pretty soon, so should see some new artwork along the Greenway shortly.
Great.
That's it.
Do the commissioners have any future agenda items that they're interested in proposing? You can always contact me directly. We usually have a meeting with myself and staff about 2 weeks before the meeting. 2 weeks to a week and a half to 2 weeks. So email before the meeting. Our next meeting date is December 18th at this location at the usual bat time. I'm sorry, same bat channel. And but it's our holiday meeting, and traditionally we have done a little dessert potluck, and enamored by not only the commissioners but some of our regular attendees. And so I'd like to propose that we do that again. And Justin, is it okay if we use you as sort of the coordinator so that we don't overlap too much?
Sure.
Great. It seems a little late to really worry about that much tonight. And so we look forward to seeing everybody after the Thanksgiving holiday and close to the other holidays. Thanks, everyone, and especially staff for sticking around.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.